Jason, about, folks, we moved the greenway, and then wants to cut the sidewalk trees down.
No. I love your dress. What did I do?
Sorry, Amber, I don't want to knock your bag over. Sorry.
That's Amber's cousins. They're from Florida. That's for Florida people. Lord Jesus.
How are
I didn't
you?
read this.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Just a reminder, we will have to do a formal
Yes.
refusal for each one.
Yeah. I'm tired, I didn't sleep well last night.
Oh, brother.
Briefly, when I was first out of law school
We got a seat
for
for
about
you,
a couple
though.
years,
Go ahead.
yeah, I did immigration and criminal
Yeah, prosecutor's office or?
private, yeah.
Oh. Too funny.
Are we live?
Yep. Yes.
We are live, all right. So, let's go ahead and let me kick this off. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come in for an extra meeting. We have a lot of things to go over this evening. We will just take them, I guess we'll go through about 5 different items before we get to the CIP.
Yep, it's 5, 6.
All right. I would like to thank all the staff for being here as well. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure that if the board has questions, you'll be here to answer. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Roberts to kick us off.
Yes, ma'am. I think, if we need to do any, we open meeting anytime like that, this workshop, we want to do some voting and stuff anyway.
Which is the first item?
Right now, it's board day.
Oh, okay, yeah, I mean, the meeting's already been open, so we're good there.
All right, we're good to go. All right, so, first item is board day. I know Jackie had been working with, I think, a smaller group, I'm gonna say a subgroup or subcommittee of the board, to kind of flesh this out. And I know Commissioner Kipler had some comments also. And Jackie, maybe you can go through, this is sort of the spreadsheet, I think it lays out all the different options, and I think Jackie can talk a little bit about maybe where we think the majority of the board landed, but we need to get some clear direction so we can make sure we budget for that program.
So this spreadsheet that Bobby has displayed shows all of the municipalities, population 25 to 100,000, and what their board, their mayor pro tem, and board members' pay is. At the bottom, you see an average. I want to explain that far right column. In that far right column, I compared the last 2 years of league survey. If you see a smaller column, say 3% or 16.9%, 51%, folks are probably changing their board pay in non-consecutive years, like they're waiting 3 or 4 or 5 or some number of years between them. If it's a smaller number, so you can see a number of organizations are not changing theirs at all from 1 year to the next, so they're changing 0%, and then you got some folks that are changing 2.1 or 3. So I wanted you to be able to see what other folks are doing. The next spreadsheet, Bobby, not the Word document, but that one, thank you. From the last time you changed your board pay, I started with 14,000 and I picked a number of 3%. But this is I have this in an Excel document. If you want to ask me, Jackie, if we change by 2.5% a year, or 1% a year, or 5%, or any other number, what I'm saying is if you had changed by some same percentage every single year, what would it be by now? And I think at the bottom of that spreadsheet, it would show you by category what each one would be. And so I shared that with Commissioner Boone. You sat on that committee, sir, with Derek and Lance, true?
That's correct.
And so my understanding is that group came back, and now if you'll go to the Word document, please, Bobby. I think they came up with options A, B, C, and D, and discussion with at least 3 board members. I think that those 3 said, option Goldilocks style. A is probably a little too high. B is probably might not be enough, and so let's settle on C. And I believe C was the general consensus of those three, and that email got sent to the board, and I believe that, the comments on the bottom, I think, are Commissioner Kidwell's suggestion, and that's where I think we are right now.
So we just need some direction with y'all discussing, tell us where to go, and we'll make it happen.
Well, I'm going to start out by saying that the committee, we were at I think it was a January meeting, and we were discussing commissioners' pay, and everybody's kind of looking at each other, and I told the mayor that let's form a committee, and Commissioner Munger and Partey and myself, we met at the new Lowe's grocery store, and everybody brought their idea, and we had to talk Lance from the edge of the cliff back, and we had a frank discussion on the pros and the cons and the optics of the whole thing, and we were also asked to have a fourth option of what it would look like if it was just piecemeal, $60 for this, $10 for this on a monthly basis. And we came up with the four options and presented it to the group, and Commissioner Kidwell has made some good points here, and I thrown it up for discussion.
Does anyone else from the committee want to, Commissioner Munger?
Sure, so obviously I was option A, but I think at the end, and I don't want to put words into anyone's mouth, but I think option B kind of became the middle ground of sorts that I felt was still appropriate. So that is where I am at option B.
Well, we all three of us came to the same conclusion.
I just didn't want to make sure that, yeah.
It was option B or C, Jack? I thought I heard you say C, but it was B.
I thought the consensus when Commissioner Boone, Kovacs, did we speak with that day? And Lance, I understood the consensus to be in the middle, option B. I could be wrong, but that's what.
You said B, right?
B is a boy.
Okay, I thought I heard you say C at first.
I think she did.
I'm sorry, I
That's all right.
thought the consensus was B, but,
Okay, that's what I'll make sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
B.
yeah.
I'm sorry, B.
Okay, yep.
All right. Commissioner Partee, do you want to add anything?
Oh, no, I just agreed with Lance
Okay.
said, because we was the committee, we all decided on the same option, so we did.
Commissioner Kidwell, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna vote for this, I'm not gonna support it. I put in my email to everybody, I do think that some things have changed. Cell phones, we get $50 a quarter for electronics, so that would need to increase. I'm paying $100 for a cell phone here for town business and town business only.
Commissioner Kidwell, may I interject? I believe it's $150. I think it's theoretically $50 a month, $150 a quarter.
Or $150 a quarter, so, but I'm paying that monthly. And so I threw it out there with tied an increase to town staff, to where, the board wouldn't get any more up to a certain point above what we vote on to give town staff. And that's where I came up with my numbers. I know from talking with various individuals that I will be the dissenting vote on this. So you guys move forward however you want. But I will say, if you do support this, you have to support the budget in its entirety when you vote for it, because you can't vote to give yourself an increase in pay and then vote against the budget saying you didn't agree with the budget. My 2 cents.
Commissioner Munger?
So am I to ascertain from what you just said that since you'll be voting against this, you'll be voting against the budget in its entirety?
Yeah, right now. I mean,
But-
I've looked at what's being presented from the budget, so.
But when you guys you gave yourselves raises a billion years ago,
No, I did not. That was Melinda.
the old
That was your
board.
dad on the board
Yeah,
with-
but they made it a separate option that wasn't in the budget. They put it on the agenda and then did it that way. So that's an option to do with this as well.
But it did go
It went
into
into
Yeah.
effect.
But it was like in
July.
a February, y'all had it as a regular board meeting
Well,
item.
it was a discussion at retreat, and then following the retreat, a decision was made, and I don't remember when it was voted on, but, I mean, the board you can add this to an agenda and vote on
If
it
I recall-
separately from the budget.
So I was in the audience. It was a discussion in March.
When it started at,
When it
it
started-
started at retreat. So that would have been a January, February timeframe.
January, February, and then there was another vote, it was late March or April.
Yeah, I think it was either April.
Because it was because it was voted on,
It was a
it passed,
decade
and
ago.
then it had to be taken back the next meeting because it was a budget line item and then put into the budget for the following.
For the following year. It did not go into effect.
It was
until
February 2013, and then it went into effect in April, per the Herald.
But I don't
But now,
believe that.
then they had to back it
No.
out and put it for, and didn't go into effect till that June.
It did not go into effect until the next budget season, so July 1. And my memory serves, and it was a decade ago, so. So what does the board want to do? Anyone else want to add to Commissioner Phillips?
I'm fine with whatever the group, like a general consensus, it needs to be done. I mean, the whole purpose of why this even I brought it up last year was this job is a lot of work, and nobody does it for the pay, let's be real. But the thing is, if you have people with children and stuff, they can't even pay to hire a babysitter. And people take hourly workers. It keeps them from being able to be elected because they can't afford it. And we say we want a government for the people, by the people, but when you make it so only people who make certain amounts of money or people who are retired can be of service, that's alienating. So, I mean, this is a step in the right direction to make our government more inclusive for representation.
So what direction, Commissioner Torrance, do you want to add anything?
No, as Jackie said, I talked with Commissioner Boone.
Be louder, they can't hear you.
I talked with Commissioner Boone and Commissioner Munger, and I was the Goldilocks in the middle.
Goldilocks and Commissioner Boone.
Madam Mayor, there's also 3 points that I think that we got to base this on, is that the travel policy for the commissioners and the mayor will be the same as town employees, and the annual government body in the future will receive whatever the town employees receive as far as the cost of living or a raise. I think that's something that you said, Rob, excuse me, and also that the money that we get would include the cell phone, office supplies, internet, and any type of local travel. It's all part of a package.
So there'd be no separate line items for those things.
So no separate line item for a technology,
And
for example.
what I suggest up there, that 11,000 included, that's all encompassing. But where I tied mine was that the board would not receive more than, I think I put 1.5% increase going forward.
Well, I just want to be sure we're aware.
So, well, I'm glad you did, because that wasn't, I did not read it that way, and I guess.
So are you still getting the phone stipend and all that?
No.
So you,
Mm-mm.
So
okay,
it,
so all the stipend and everything goes away, we're just talking about board pay, the stipends go away.
Right.
Right. And then next year, because not this year, because we're doing this, but next year hypothetically, town staff gets a 3% raise, so would the board.
hold on. Are we talking cost of living increase or raise, merit? Because we
That's
need
fair
to,
point.
we need to delineate.
How do we give ourselves merit?
Yeah, was going to be my
That's what voters
question.
do, they get rid of you.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah,
But we don't
typically,
have COLA anymore, do we?
yeah, we do. So you want to do it, we typically base it off some CPI or whatever. So whatever the COLA is for the year, then that's ultimately what we would adjust these numbers up by. And that's, if the COLA is 1%, it's 1%. If it's 5%, it's 5%,
Or
whatever it may be.
theoretically zero.
Yep,
Or is it?
easy.
And this will be done forever. We won't have to come back and revisit it.
And that's what in town, like if you're traveling to in-town meetings, sort of in Mecklenburg County in the general area, then this sort of covers all that. And if you go somewhere else, if you decide to turn in your, if you drive to Raleigh or if you drive to Georgia on town business, obviously we'd be, fill out the paperwork, write down your mileage, your government mileage, we'll take care of that. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Correct.
All right, Jackie, you got it?
Yes.
Patty's got it over
So
there?
so do I include option B in the budget?
Option B is in the budget, is what's
No,
gonna be
sorry.
in the manager's recommended budget.
Okay.
And,
Are we going to vote on this?
Do we need
I
a-
think we need to have a vote.
Yes.
Do we want to do that this evening?
Yeah,
Well, then, will it be part of the budget, like Rob said?
It would be, still be,
Okay.
it still goes into, as part of the budget.
So we now officially have a 1-no vote on the budget. Just if we're doing it this way.
you know,
We just need a consensus now,
Correct.
and then there would be a vote, of course, with the budget.
Well, that was my question. Do we want to solidify this with a vote this evening?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
I think so.
Make a motion that we go with option B with the 3
Yes.
points.
I'm sorry. I thought during these sessions, we didn't actually
That's
take
where
a
consensus.
vote. Well, he's making a motion.
Thus I was asking earlier, do we want to bring this back on the next agenda for a vote? Or could we do that this evening, but
But if we
we
have
would
it
do
in the
this
budget, it's
evening?
just a
I've
budget.
got consent, depends on what Emily says here, but I've got consensus, and it's gonna be in the manager's recommended budget, because I've got enough feedback.
I was
here
saying
to be in the
straw
manager's
vote,
recommended
like
budget.
a consensus with
misunderstood what
a
you
straw
said
vote,
when-
yeah.
when
So
you-
I'm good to go,
But
and
that's
you will
fine.
see it in the manager's recommended budget, and then you will, when it comes time to vote on the budget, you'll vote it up and down based on the entire package. So I'm good unless Emily tells me I need something otherwise.
Everyone else good with that? Okay.
All right, Mayor, I'll move on to the next item. And we, Jackie, if you want, we'll come back to the employee pay, but let's go to, because we got more information on here, spreadsheet while we got this up. Let's hit the actual employees that are in this year's budget. So there's a request for, what you'll see in front of you here is a spreadsheet. Jackie, we emailed all this stuff out.
Yes.
These are the number of positions that will be in the manager's recommended budget as of right now. Within the police department, there are 9 employees. 4 of those, I would say, are related to victims advocate. 3 are related to SRO. One's the fleet service coordinator, and then 1 the captain. And these are all benefits included in those
Yes,
numbers?
sir, that salary number includes benefits, and may I interject, SROs, we believe would be CMS funded, so that's a pass-through list.
Yes, so I'll stop on the police side and maybe talk through some of those. I see the chief's back there in the corner. But the police give you a little bit of maybe a definition for each one. I'll try to, maybe speaking to the mic, I'm turning my head and looking up there too, so see if I can get to my piece of paper so I can talk into the mic. So the fleet services coordinator, chief, you want to take that one, or you want me to give up my 2-line?
Either way,
So basically, anything police car related, putting on lights, computers, anything that goes in and out of the car, getting it serviced to go get oil changes, et cetera, that's what the fleet service person will be doing. Anything and everything related to a car. Helping order the cars, helping dispose of the cars, helping put on the light, getting the light bars in, taking the light bars off, all those kind of things. That's what fleet service coordinators do.
Who's doing it now?
Chief?
Oh, wow.
that's where that one came from. We've been trying to eliminate administrative work for sworn officers, just like last year.
And you may have to, Chief. Larry, is this mic on over here?
I can turn it.
Just in case, I don't know if you can hear him, Janet. I know I can hear him, but I don't know if the public can hear him.
They wouldn't be able to hear him back there.
He probably will come up here, just be on the safe side.
This is a civilian position, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Maybe just go through them all, Chief, that way while you're up there at the mic.
Okay. Just to clarify, the fleet service coordinator came out of our discussions we've had for the last couple of years to try to reduce the amount of sworn officers doing non-sworn related work. And fleet services is one of those where we've always done it here with sworn officers. Sometimes it's light duty people, sometimes we get that option, but normally it's just done by sworn officers in our support service unit. So that would be a civilian. The victim's advocate, the lead, of course, would be the supervisor of that, those 3 victims advocates. We've talked about this at length. So they will be providing services both internally and externally, going on calls, answering calls with officers anytime there's a mental health related issue. And they'll also be following up on calls that they see come through that they didn't get called out to, and making sure that services got provided and following up, checking in on them. SROs, you remember from our budget retreat, I told you I asked for CMS for 2 SROs and a supervisor to supervise them. We'll have a total of 7. And CLEA requires us to have a supervisor for that many people. What I understand is CMS has made it through this process for Mecklenburg County, and it'll go to the full board for a vote. And it's got support, at least from the administration side of CMS. So hopefully that'll get funded. The captain's position, that was my first priority, as you know. I mentioned that. Right now, we have 2 captains in a large department. It's very complex. I got 1 captain retiring in July. So 50% of my captains are retiring at one time. For succession planning, to be able to cover everything, the complexities we need to cover, we've got to have 3 captains. We should have had 3 captains 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but we just never did. And I can talk at length about the reason for that if you got questions about it, but those were mine.
Chief, will you address the one on the bottom, the not funding the police tech specialist?
Yeah, so our camera system, we're still doing a lot of our camera system with sworn personnel. These are particular individuals that have some skills to do that with. And that's the one thing that I think I can continue to do for, a little while, but eventually you're going to want to switch that over to civilian as well. Right now, we're in the middle of installs. We've got some movement from the power companies to get some more cameras up, and we would probably wind up continuing with these sworn officers by the time before we could get somebody hired anyway. But eventually, for the long-term maintenance, you're going to want to switch this over. Right now, we don't have all our cameras hung, so the demand is not quite as high.
So this position would benefit your traffic camera project, but it also, would it have anything to do with body cams and dash cams?
Any kind of camera. So, for example, right now, if a subpoena comes in for body cam video, which we get body cam video subpoenas every day, multiples. Somebody has to sit down and do that. It'll be all the traffic cameras, but it'll also be any of our in-car cameras, any of our other related cameras. So it's really a technical surveillance type of thing. They will be managing all of our surveillance, including our open records requests and things like that. We don't get open records requests on camera, but court orders to determine that.
Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, I was just going to add to the chief, even though I like him a lot. We did do a little fact checking on the captain position, and with some of the large agencies to sort of see what the admin sort of staff looks like, and at a minimum, you're going to see typically 3 or 4 captains at agencies our size. You look at the Mooresvilles, et cetera. Jackie got those numbers and did a lot of research just to verify. Like I said, I love the chief to death, but we just want to verify kind of how
Checking up on me.
Yeah, checking up, see how that looks.
Commissioner Kimball?
Chief, you talked about the SROs and the sergeant with CMS. They made it through the initial discussion for the county, but let's say it gets voted down at the CMS. Are we willing to hold the line, what we talked about during the retreat, saying that you get your own SROs?
I hope so. I mean, we're taking a big risk of having one SRO at these schools. I don't want to do that, obviously, but we have to make sure that we can provide the service we say we're going to provide.
And that, I'm sorry, but that also includes, remember in that discussion, like if they, on a snow day, they call off, we end up paying the SRO. This covers all of that. They pay for the snow days.
Well, that's what I've requested the next contract to look like, but until we get that contract, I really don't know. To your point, just to re-explain, they do everything on a daily basis instead of a 8-month contract. And when they have school, unannounced school out, they don't pay us for those days. Yet our SROs are still doing school-related stuff. So we've asked them to give us a contract for a year. You pay us this amount, period. And if you call days off, you still pay.
And
So-
that's the type of contract they have with Charlotte, correct?
I think so. We are requesting something different than they've done before, but I think it's justified. And we'll have those discussions again if they approve these positions, they'll draft a contract and send it to us for signature. And at that point, we can address that. It's really not a part of this request in the sense that that's a separate deal.
Commissioner Martinez?
What's the status of the K-9 officer who's on injured reserve? Will that officer be able to come back to full service, or do we need to start putting the planning for another K-9 officer?
I think in the next short while, I'll be asking for 2 K-9s. We've got 1 K-9 retiring. We don't know about the K-9 that's injured.
Right.
I'm anticipating the dog won't come back. Not that we wouldn't welcome him back, but you want the dog to have good quality of life and all that stuff. And I've already talked to the handler about it, who's interested in another dog and taking care of the other dog. Of course, that's the way this handler dogs.
Right.
So we've got budget for that. We've got forfeiture funds for that, and we'll be asking for that person.
Any other questions? Commissioner Booth?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, I just want to be sure that if CMS says no to our additional SROs and a sergeant, they know that we're going to pull the Huntersville SROs out of the schools. Is that?
That's what I said in my request. But now, I caveat that by saying it's really up to you.
Well, that's what I was gonna say is, when you have those conversations, as soon as you do, if you can bring that back to Mr. Roberts and then communicate back to the board so that the board can make some tough decisions.
I will tell you that the initial reaction I got from CMS is they understand that we've got to fix this problem. I really do believe they know we have to fix it, and I'm pretty optimistic that they'll do that.
When do you think you'll have a certain answer?
I would think probably within a month, whenever CMS votes on their budget, whenever that is, so, and it usually happens before we get the contract phase, so I would think not too much longer.
And my final question, Chief, is the victim's advocate. I'm going to support this, but when we first started out, we had 1 advocate, and now we've got 4 over a 3-year trial period. And we're going to have to go out and hire these 3 additional people along with a lead or a supervisor. I'd like to suggest to the board is that the first year, let's just hire 2 people, and through work and their performance, we'll find out who the supervisor might be. The second year, hire the next 2, and hoping that that supervisor will come out of that original group of people that we hired. So we don't have all that cost up front. And I'm sure it's going to be pretty difficult to reach out and get 4 people, but that's what I'd like to propose, just a suggestion.
I wouldn't have an issue with that at all.
Commissioner Munger?
I must have missed the part where it was a 3-year trial period. Is that was the intent?
No, I would not recommend a trial period because you're going to have trouble finding career employees for a trial period.
All right, great. I mean, we know the job market as is right now, it's very tight. In general, I think if you tell someone that, yeah, we're going to hire you, but in 3 years or however, we might have to let you go because this is a trial thing, they'll take the more permanent position.
I think what we discussed was a pilot. I don't know that I heard trial,
Maybe
but I
that was
think
the
we
word,
talked
pilot.
pilot.
We would never go say, well, this is 3-year temporary, because you can imagine we can't hire full-time people now to fill spots. But if for whatever reason, let's say, this is not getting the job done, or it's not meeting our needs, then we may need to shift the turn in a different direction. Whatever that means, whether they go into another civilian role, whether we continue down this path and change maybe what they're doing in a different direction, because this is a learning thing for us too.
Sure.
If I could recommend, I think there's middle ground, like, if I could recommend this, let's hire 2 this year. And Lance is very strong about the full thing, and I understand that. But I think instead of doing a pilot program, we know I've got more workload than 2 people. I know that. But it takes a while to ramp up, because they have to get integrated, they have to build a relationship with officers. Officers have to know they're the real deal, you can call them, they're helpful, that kind of thing. And we can ramp up with 2 people, and I think I can justify keeping 2 people forever. I would recommend doing that instead of calling it a pilot or a temporary program. And then at the end of the first year, I have to come back to you and justify the other 2 based on the work that we see. And I think that would be safe for us to assume that I can keep 2 very busy. And if it works out, we'll do what you want.
Commissioner
Also, Chief, we can't be too presumptuous also, because when you deal with victimization, you're dealing with the tragedy of people's lives, especially domestic violence, and there might be a turnover in SROs, and not SROs, but in the advocates that we might hire too. There's stress involved in the job, and there's a mindset that you have to develop, like I say, relationship with these people, with victims. So, 3 or 2, I like 3, because we don't know what the turnover is going to be, and what they're going to get involved in. I don't know what the caseload is when it comes to domestic violence or victimization, but it's very stressful.
Let me tell you, I'm sure of the 4 number because I've looked at our numbers, and you got to remember, it's not just the caseload, it's the availability. It's availability till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. That's where that 4 comes in. But also know that when you ramp up a new program, it never goes as fast as you want it to, from the training to the integration. So I'm very comfortable doing 2 and 2 and having to come back with you next year to show you why that other 2. I know that answer's going to be there.
So, Commissioner Munger.
Sure. So obviously this is kind of my passion thing, and just kind of give you some background on it. I remember Friday the 13th, 2020, March 13th, there was a murder-suicide in Vermillion. Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were multiple visits to that particular house for domestic violence. And ultimately, it ended up with 2 people dead. Commissioner Partee shared something with me.
That's the case,
Yeah,
the other day.
another situation in North Carolina, there was obviously distress, they didn't know how to deal with the situation, murder-suicide.
2 kids were killed, and 1 wife.
Yeah. So, for me, it's about saving lives, first and foremost, and that is the number 1 goal. The second goal, we need to let police officers do their police work. And Chief was kind enough to send some statistics with me, share some statistics with me. In 2021, there were 3,032 calls for service related to mental health. 3,032 calls in Huntersville. 2 people will be completely overwhelmed. When I originally came before here and brought this up, I said 6. 6 gives you 24/7 full coverage with the availability of having people, allowing them to take vacations. 3 is a huge compromise. I mean, if we're thinking that I'm throwing 3 out there as the big number is 6. 6 is the adequate staffing to be able to get service 24/7. So when I peel back to 3, I am dead set on 3.
Well,
Plus the
technically 4.
Right, fair, plus the supervisor. But that's how we got to where we are.
Commissioner Kidwell.
So, Chief, and I know I copied Commissioner Munger on the email, you had answered it, mental health calls are not just, that's a wide range.
Very well.
I mean, it could be from someone who's just walking down the street talking to themselves, and they get police called on them, to domestic disturbance. But how do we measure success? And that was, that's the big thing, is how do we measure success? How do we know? And I'm not against this, Commissioner Munger, and I've told you this. But I am an advocate of understanding, are we doing this as we go forward through a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Is it making an impact? That's something to the board to think about, and I don't expect an answer from anybody, but how do you measure success on something like this? Do we see less mental health calls? No, we're not gonna see less mental health calls because we're growing, population. But how do we measure success to make sure that 4 is enough, or is it 6, or is it only 2?
Yeah, I think when you measure
Repeat calls.
inputs, the inputs are gonna be,
I don't.
we're answering more calls because we've got more people on the same calls. But I think the outcomes, if you look at outcomes, and it's very hard to measure those right now, my point I made in the email, is we are providing services that we don't currently provide, like follow-up services, making sure they got the referral, making sure they got a family member that's taking care of them. Had an Alzheimer's patient recently that just had nobody taking care of him. It wasn't that he was being neglected, that he just didn't have anybody. And those kind of follow-up things, and I think it's going to be hard to measure outcomes. I hate to say this because I hate it when people say it to me. It's hard to measure outcomes until you get started with it and try to see how to measure those, because right now we're just responding, we're being reactive, responding to the volume of calls. And we know that sworn officers are not providing those follow-on services. We're just going to the next call.
I think you're dealing with HIPAA also, so a lot of it's
Yeah, we won't be able to talk about
a lot of it's confidential, so you won't know.
I'm not, no, and that's the thing. I understand HIPAA from an HR
Especially with
perspective.
mental health.
Running the companies that I've ran and managing the HR side. This is more of a, like you said, it's hard to measure, but
I get your point
there's
there.
got
I
to
mean,
be
we
measurements
Well, I'm
to
sure
see if a program's successful, otherwise we're just going to keep throwing.
should have some performance measures for everything we do, and I know exactly where you're coming from on that. But this is, it's going to be difficult to do that from the bottom.
Commissioner Phillips?
Like, the 4, like, that's a bare minimum ask. I really feel like that. Social workers burn out. We cannot put that kind of responsibility on an individual to carry responsibly and morally, because this isn't easy work. I have friends that are social workers, and volunteering in the things I volunteer in, as I can't imagine what only 2 people would have to carry with them in a burden, because the thing is, crisis doesn't have a time clock. And I share this story because it's real life. I've had to take somebody who had, in the process of overdosing, to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, the person inside the ER said they have to walk in themselves, we can't admit them. And I was like, oh my God, I knew what they took. And they told me, they said, call 911 while you're sitting here with me. So I did. So the next thing you know, here comes the fire department. Literally, here comes an EMS from their parking lot. Here comes the cops to talk this person who was going to overdose into walking in the hospital. That was a one and done situation. That person eventually did something again, similar. And there was no follow-up of care because their social worker was so overwhelmed with cases. And this was a specific Huntersville situation. I've dealt in other situations volunteering in what I do that I cannot repeat here, but I feel like things could have been avoided had we had these. Your people, they have to take home with them the things that they can't help. And I don't wish those burdens on other humans because that's a lot for somebody to handle. I've come to you guys about a young person who got kicked out of their home in the car, and you guys did God's work with that. A social worker could have been there for another kid because these aren't one and dones. And then I think back even last week in Cabarrus County, a child overdosed and died on opioids. And I think about our police department going to these calls in certain places and having to leave those kids behind. Having somebody, multiple people on staff who can help in these situations, it can't be measured because, hope to God, it's preventative. Like, for me, that's prevention. And as Rob was about, our raises or whatever, I will stay with Lance on this, that it has to be 4 because we can't half-butt this.
I want to say too, it's great points, and I want y'all to remember that we're not providing direct care services. That's one of the problems you have in measuring things, because we don't know whether they're getting direct care services. What we're trying to do is we're trying to fill that gap where they don't get to those direct services. They don't have anybody pushing them to those direct services. And, you know, we're going to measure our success based on referrals, I know. How many people have we referred? But we can't go and follow up and talk to the person we referred to and say, hey, did this person come see you? That's HIPAA. So it is very difficult, and we are doing something that is difficult to measure, but we know that gap's there. We see.
But you also can measure it, because if you have the same homes that you continuously get called to.
That's true.
And then those calls reduce, then that's a little insight without breaking the law.
Commissioner Cohen?
I was going to say, actually, along those lines, that you could look at the measurement of repeat offender type things and see if that number goes down. But I do support the 4, because I think if they're going to be, if these positions are going to be a conduit to helping people thrive, then we need to set up these people that take these positions for success. You can't start them out and then have, what was number 3,600 or something, mental health calls, whatever. So like, somewhere around there. So you have, 1,800 cases for one person. We're setting them up for failure before they even get to start. And then we don't give the program a true chance.
I think we'll still, if we do 4, it'll probably be 2 for 6 months. Last 6 months, the other 2. I mean, there's a ramp up period. There's, y'all know that. It takes.
The labor market's tight, it might be hard to even get them.
Yes.
Or people jump ship from other social work jobs and come here because this is a unique opportunity to work with the police department and not carry that burden alone. I think it's very in tandem, and I think this could be good for your officers, especially since we have hiring problems.
I don't know who all's been talking about it, but we've already had an inquiry from somebody that's very, very, very well qualified. So.
Mr. Roberts?
Just hitting on what they said, we'll be lucky to get 4 on day 1. So we'll try tail off to get 4 from the get-go, but unless we can get them to jump ship, it'll take a while to get those 4 on.
So do you need anything from us this evening?
I think because I hear just on consensus, you'll see these in the manager's recommended budget. Obviously, you'll have more discussion on it, I'm sure, and the other items. Maybe if it's okay, we'll get Brian up to talk a little bit of planning, and then MJ, Parks and Rec.
Before we move off of police, I do have a question. Is this 9 extra individuals? So
New. These are new
these
positions.
are,
That's correct.
okay, just to be clear with me, I know we still have a few empty slots, but these are 9 additions.
Can go back to the fleet services? Didn't Kevin and them need help with that too?
Yeah, there's a little bit, Kevin and them were looking at, someone actually coming in, changing oil, rotating.
Okay, I didn't know if it was some kind
And-
of overlap that we could possibly do for both
Well,
departments.
that's what we looked at that, and it may be some, but you're talking, ton more vehicles, but ultimately, could you wrap all that in? Possibly, but there are other things besides just oil changing and tire rotation.
Yeah.
This is not actually doing any oil changes and tire rotation, this is maybe shipping them out to the places to get it done, but it includes all the other things we talked about, all the stuff taken off, disposing cars, opening cars, et cetera. So you may, Kevin, and then may come back eventually, and they'll continue to look at that we may look at how we can do that in-house.
Any other questions at this point? So do we want to go ahead and move on now to planning then?
While Brian's probably coming up and taking Mike, we'll give the chief a little break. So a transportation planner, new position would be a senior planner, which focuses on transportation. As you know, actually in the last couple of years, I think we've been doing a plan. And so what's happening is with the 2040 plan, there's an action plan too. There's items that have to come out of that, text amendments and different things like that. Same thing with downtown plan. I'm sure there's going to be action items. Same thing with the mobility plan, it's action item. Somebody's gotta take those action items and work through that. And, you know, Dave has been doing some of that, and I think they've been tag teaming some of the transportation plan. Brian, take it over, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty
I'm
much,
rambling.
yeah, no, that's it about a nutshell, and so we've developed all these plans, we need people to help develop, implement these things, and if that one person, who is currently Dave Hill, is just doing planning, we're never implementing, so we need to get the transportation efforts off of that role, and back to, like, lack of a better term, the old Bill Cox role. We had someone who could represent us on all these boards, the MTC, the CRTPO, and penetrate, and the TCC, and penetrate those organizations to well represent the town and position us. So we're always in a good position to get funding more favorably than the other communities. If the senior plan we have now is just doing planning, we're not doing both of these jobs, and it's very important for us to put Huntersville in the best position that we can be, to take advantage of these things that are out here. Anytime there's federal funding involved, the workload goes up 50–60%, and we need someone to be able to administer those things. And that's kind of where we're at, and that's why we're requesting this role this year.
Commissioner Kidwell?
Yeah, Brian, this is a vital role. You know, I worked with Bill Cox, for as much as I disagreed with him on certain things, he and I worked very well together down at CRTPO, and having someone who can, I won't say infiltrate, but navigate down there and these other organizations for us is key. Because, you know, as elected officials, yeah, we can do so much at the top, but really having someone helping support our wishes and dreams, especially at the CRTPO level, is key. So I completely agree with you on that.
Anyone else? Are we good with leaving, adding an additional transportation planner to the roles? Yes, we got a good straw poll.
Yeah, but I'm also, do we need another planner in general besides just this one?
Part of my role is to do some of this. I can't even touch it. I am buried. I'm doing plan review, I'm doing permitting, things that are outside of my purview.
I'm asking, besides a transportation planner, do we need
do we
an
need
additional planner? I mean, if you're gonna make an ask, make the ask, man.
Well, we're gonna ask for this, we'll ask for this year. We have filled our open role for the senior planner, and let's get these folks on board and rolling. Like you said, it's hard to find good people, and it's hard to get them, you know, up and running. And I think we'll stick with the one this year, but I appreciate it.
I think if the activity continues, like it's going, you'll probably.
I would agree. If we're still staying anywhere near the level we're at, I would anticipate asking for another role next year.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay,
Great, thank you.
thank you.
And while MJ's getting up on the Parks and Rec, I do want to say on and Steve is here, on the engineering technician, it's not that we don't need that. We're down a couple of people there, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But I will tell you that when we get full in engineering, I will be coming back to you to get this tech, and we need to be doing some shuffling. So I don't want you to think that's not needed. It's just sort of like the police department. Chief down 30 or 40 people to be where it needs to be, but why, if I can't get to full, I can't get to those. So that's somewhat what we're trying to work through in engineering too. But go ahead, MJ, I'll let you take over.
So first, I'll start with the rec superintendent position. For those who've been here a long time, at one point, we had a rec superintendent as well as assistant director. So from 2005 to 2017, we had a rec superintendent and an assistant director. Our assistant director in 2017 passed away. So for that 2-year period, from 2017 to 2019, we just pushed through without having an assistant director. And then late 2019, we reclassed the current rec superintendent into assistant director. So now we never filled that rec superintendent position, so we try to push it through for the last 2 years, but based on the increase in parks and facilities, our daily operations, increase in projects, this rec superintendent will take back those responsibilities that the assistant director kept, such as marketing, sponsorships. A lot of the sponsorships we used to get over the years, we just don't have time to actually go after a lot of those. There's a lot of money out there to go after. So this position helps the assistant director focus more on the day-to-day operations, as well as helping out with projects and grants and so forth. So this is new position this year, but it's actually a makeup of our department we had for a 12-year period prior to 2017. So this is kind of getting that position back is what the rec superintendent position is. And then the program, we talked a little bit about this at the retreat. So what we did here is, a part-time position's been hard to get filled. So what we did here, we took 2 19-hour-week, 20-hour-week positions, part-timers, made it into a full-time position, which is a program. So this position would help cover nights and weekends at gyms or at parks, helping out with summer camp and after school. So it's kind of hopefully be more stable for us because it's very difficult when you don't have people working, we're 7 days a week, so 10:30 at night, using gyms and parks and so forth. People don't show up, it looks pretty bad. Other staff's got to scramble. Staff members run a program, in the middle of the program, someone calls, so-and-so's not there to open the gym. Someone's got to go do something. So it's put us in a bind in a lot of situations. So really the program leader's not really adding any hours of work per se. It's more combining hours we have approved, but we just have a hard time filling those positions.
Any questions? Are we good? Okay.
Could you send us like the job description for the recreation superintendent? That way we know like what kind of background, et cetera, to justify that kind of money.
Before I let you go, it does sound like we tried, like we had 2 people, right? And we tried to go without.
Yes,
and,
that's right.
and found that the workload was just too much.
That's right. We asked for this position maybe 2 years ago. COVID time, COVID started shutting things down. I told Anthony, well, let's not ask for it last year. We don't know what COVID was going out. Things have ramped up so quickly in this program. It's kind of overwhelming.
Thank you.
Now, remember, these are all in numbers, benefits and everything. And then I assume, Michael, you'll use I don't know if you got, it's probably, dust off the old,
Yeah.
because I'm sure you and Laura hadn't worked out a newer version of it yet, of what that
I mean,
title
salary is, athletic superintendent, rec superintendent, pretty much identical, just one of those recreational with athletics.
So,
Commissioner Munger?
Just out of curiosity, what's our overhead on benefits, like 25%?
I would have said closer to 30.
Closer to 30?
It's going to vary by what the position makes an hour, but generally ballpark 30.
Thank you.
all right, the next one is IT help desk. I think those 3 words probably say exactly what it is, but maybe Larry, you can, I don't know if you're on the mic over there, whether you need to come over here, but maybe you can explain why you're going to the mic. Literally anything that even looks, smells, that may even be connected to, that touches a computer, is what, everything, the doors, to the cameras, to the copiers, to the fax, to the cell phones, to the mobile units in cars, to your computers at your desk, to your laptops, to streaming, to
Ring Central
phone, to whatever goes through Larry. And the 2 guys that help him. I can't remember, I know during the budget retreat, they probably talked about how many actual pieces of equipment they touch. I have no clue how many it is anymore, but Larry, maybe you can do a little better job than I did, but I tried to hit all the things you touch and why you need this person.
Sure. I mean, what Anthony was talking about, right now we have major projects going on, 3 with CMPD alone. 85-ish MDTs that we have to deal with, and you're constantly re-imaging, things of that sort, which takes a lot of time. Pushing out new PCs, repairing old PCs, copiers, streaming events, meetings, so it just, the list goes on and on and on. So right now, we're just so swamped that we just need help to come in. We have cameras, Greenway cameras. I've probably hung 130 cameras myself. So we need help with that as well. So the list just continues to grow as technology is introduced, and we rely on it more.
Any questions? Commissioner Shea?
More for Anthony. At what point will IT take over for technical specialists? Please. what point will IT position take over? It's a civilian position in the future, chief.
That's why it was pulled, because, so you hit, that's why, of course, Chief's probably going to frown at me, but that's why I didn't recommend funding that at this point in time. Hopefully, you know, Larry and them have hung, Larry and them have hung some of the cameras, as you said, 130. Larry is familiar with helping hang cameras on the police side. So there may be some help there to sort of get us over the hump while the chief is, frowning on me until next year. So I'm sure that will be some of that work going on too. That's why that position was sort of pulled down the bottom. Larry has done that work before and has done a lot of cameras already.
I'm not opposed to all of this because we're the biggest consumer of IT help desk. And having people to fix our things are very beneficial to us, so.
Larry does everything, we don't outsource any repairs or
No, we try to keep this in-house.
installation, we don't outsource?
The only thing that we outsource is probably cabling, running cable, because it's more cost effective, right? These guys are pros, they can go knock it out versus, but yeah, so that's the only thing we really outsource is like cable runs. Everything else we try to do in-house.
Is one person enough, Larry?
For now, yeah, I'd rather.
You're like a kid in a candy.
I'd rather, we just spent the past 3 years uplifting everything. When we came in 3 years ago, everything was antiquated, out of date, out of support. So we spent the past 3 years kind of getting the town, in a position so we can, now, we hear Lance is in IT and you hear cybersecurity. So, that's the stuff we face every day and that's just the nature of the beast. But for now, I think this is fine. But as the town grows, right, we add more positions and years to come. It's just eventually you'll have to add more.
So you have cybersecurity also, everything is good.
Commissioner Booth?
Thank you. Larry, with the police department taking up most of your time with IT and the help desk, do you think this person would be better housed at the police department versus across the street?
So we rotate them out, and just traditionally, in my opinion, I really don't like putting one specific person at one place because that's all they know. So when they leave, all that knowledge leaves. I like to rotate stuff out, and so far it's worked well. We're there, 5 days a week, most of the days anyway. So if it's me or one of the other guys, we're in and out there pretty much every day. So I just didn't want to pigeonhole one person to have that, that knowledge, and if they leave, we're just, we're scrambling back to hopefully, review notes and stuff like that. So that's kind of how we function now.
Thank you.
I think that's fabulous to hear, frankly, that you're thinking forward.
Not to mention that they might actually take a vacation.
Right, absolutely.
Good to hear.
Any other questions for Larry? Okay.
I did want to, while I got Stephen here, to tell us a little bit about engineering technician. And like I say, it's not that, it's not an important position. If he gets the other positions filled, we've been toying with how to best do some of that, with filling in some of those gaps, maybe even reclassifying, titles and doing all sorts of things. As engineers right now, almost as hard, maybe even harder than hiring police officers right now. It's just, they're tough to find. You find them, you're going to pay dearly. But Steve, maybe tell us a little bit about this. And as I said, this is, I anticipate coming back at some point in time for this one. And maybe if we get full, I may come sooner than later.
Sure, so the request is for a technician, and I'd say along the lines of what the police are trying to do. We have a big need for data collection and data management. So this is not an engineer position. This is supporting the engineer so that an engineer doesn't have to do all this. We're trying to collect data on, I'd say, roughly 300 miles of sidewalk that the town maintains, and then manage that data and keep up with it. Sections replaced or fixed, or just collecting and managing that data. The town maintains, I think, close to 7,000 street signs. And collecting, keeping up with, one gets hit, one gets replaced, just keeping up with that data. You don't need an engineer to be able to do that, but that's what we have. To try to do that, and to be honest, that work's not getting done.
Commissioner Phillips?
I don't know why we're not going ahead and doing this then, because if it's hard to get engineers, you guys need supportive services. Like, that's how my head thinks, like, okay, so we can't get you an engineer, well, let's get you some help so your engineers aren't overwhelmed. And if we know it's gonna come back anyways, why wouldn't we go ahead and put it in the budget?
Mr. Roberts?
So a good point. Actually, what we may be thinking is, geez, if we can't hire an engineer, why not take one of the guys and hire some technicians, and work it that way if we can't, because we've had an engineering position open for a year.
I mean, we did that for the police last year, we gave them the civilian positions because of the same issue, so we should give them the same courtesy, I feel.
So ultimately, what I would probably do is say, Steve, if you can't find the engineer, go hire the technician. And find a technician to get some of this stuff off your plate, and we'll continue to work the engineer and see how we figure that out. But either way, whatever the board wants to do, but that's my thought. We would, if we can't find the engineer, find the technician.
Commissioner
If you find
Gamble?
both, hire both.
How many technicians can you get for one engineer? Like pay wise, is it 1-to-1, 1.5-to-1? Not that we're looking for half. 1-to-2?
Well, we've had to farm out some of the engineering. So for instance, in stormwater, give you a good example, you know, Mike McIntyre by himself, Mike is retired. So we've had to look at how can we, I'm just giving you some way the brain thinks what we have to do sometimes and make it work. Can we take folks, existing engineers in-house, try to get them trained so they can do some stormwater work so that if Mike falls off the boat tomorrow, some of those folks are trained internally, or else we would be, you know, in a bad position. So what we're trying to do is figure out how to make that, it's probably 1.5. Technician 1.5 to get your question.
Okay.
But we're trying to figure out ways to make it work with either farming some of the stuff out. I mean, we're right now on stormwater stuff, we're using Labella, which is a firm to do some of the stormwater stuff because we just can't find this position that we're trying to fill. So we're trying different things.
Any other questions?
But
So
if
it
the board
sounds
says put it in there, look, I'm not gonna jump off the building. If you tell me to put it in there, I'll be happy.
So,
Either way.
Well, I think you should put it in there because you don't know when, you said it's hard to find these people. So you want both positions to be there. You don't want to take out the engineer and then risk, we finally find one after a year and we don't have that position available. So we might not be spending it in the fiscal year if we can't find anybody, but the availability is important.
That,
And I'm good with that. We were just farming out. If we can't find an engineer in-house, I will contract it out to try to fill the gaps.
so we'll go ahead and add an engineering technician into the budget.
That's
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to provide a little bit extra information, when you consult out, that's an option. The costs are probably 2.5 to 3 times salary plus benefits.
So, are we already consulting out for things?
Yes.
Could,
Because we can't find.
So-
can't find people.
Can
have
we-
the positions, but we can't find them, I think is a bigger problem.
no, I'm asking because I would like to know how much we're spending with these consultants, because maybe we need to up the pay that we're offering. I mean, it could balance out down the road, you know, like you get an employee in here, you know, the standard pay you're gonna give them for years plus whatever, versus these firms going up and down in fees and prices because,
We're having a hard time finding people too. It's not just us, it's industry-wide.
We're fighting for the same people, so like cops, towns are fighting for the same cops, and there's not many coming out. And engineers coming out with so high pay now, it's unreal.
But we have looked at the salary range and readjusted as we're looking to hire, correct?
Yeah, we're looking at that, we'll continue to have to look. Did we look at engineers this year?
Yes, sir.
We look at a third,
Yeah.
roughly. But it's ever changing, that's the problem with the engineer. Now, you come back 3 years now, when they're in their roads and they can fill this building up with it. Everybody be laid off and they'll be hunting down it up, so it just
Are you comparing our range to other cities and towns, or are you comparing it to the private sector?
I'll let Lauren.
So we looked at the public sector as our basis because that's where we can get the most specific information back. Like Anthony has said and Stephen has said, the problem is we're competing against the private sector. We have a hard time getting the data on actual salaries with the private sector because that's not information that they share like municipalities share. So we know we're in a little bit of a catch-22 where our information that we get as far as salaries may be dated from other municipalities because we don't change as quickly as the private market does. And knowing that we're competing against the private sector for a very limited supply of employees, we try to balance the two, and that's where we look at, we have a range, where typically we have hired at the minimum of the range, looking at how we can better move within that range to potentially hire at a higher rate.
You gotta compete with the private sector. I mean, it's,
It's tough. Every position is like that right now. I mean, just cops leaving for private sector jobs, it's just tough all around. You'll see when we go talk about COLA. It is what it is, unfortunately.
Are we good with where we're ending our new hire discussion?
Look at that, Steve, you get up, you get one.
Yeah.
I got you, like, you know.
You're the next meeting.
come on down.
Chad, you messed up, man.
So next on the list then was the discussion around the external agencies.
Can I interject? This is not exactly the way we sent it to you because we added the North Mid Crime Stoppers a row, 4 from the top. You probably don't have that on your list.
Yeah, so we'll need to go through each of these individually.
Okay.
And if any of the town board members need to recuse themselves, then we need to go through that process and have them step out.
I'll just step
Okay.
out now and see you guys in a bit.
All right,
So then we make
let's-
sure
you
who
wanna
done
go?
what, just to make sure.
You and I have the first
so
one.
we will start with Ada Jenkins, so
Recuse.
Yep.
both of you. Okay.
How's it going, you?
All right, let's start with, their requested, so last year, we gave them 20,000. This year, the amount requested is 45. That's 25,000 increase. Everyone received their paperwork and the documentation that they provided. I'm going to open Ada Jenkins up for discussion.
Do we know how much government funding they got?
Bobby, they got, they didn't get any from the county, did they? They've not got any per round, no. As of right now, they have.
This increase was because of that program, correct? They want to be able to add that tutoring program here, a large portion of the increase?
I don't have that.
I think that was $700,000
Yeah.
for the, add that program.
So then what is this significant increase due to?
So I think that from my conversations and what I think we heard LearnWorks. We also heard caseworkers. They were going to be providing caseworkers into some of the communities in Huntersville. Huntington Green being one, and I believe the discussion was a potential one for the Pottstown community. Is that correct?
They brought it up. I don't know if that's
But I don't know, like I said, they
intention.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we have never in the past done is directly tie the dollars to a specific program. It has always been, this is the ask, it's either yes or no or somewhere in between.
I'll just offer a point of clarification. They do have to sign contracts with the town to ensure that they are using the funds that we give them for what they put in their application.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I've said it before, I'll say it again. I do not think it is the responsibility of the town to spend taxpayer dollars, other than tourism dollars, because we're required by law, on any charity, 501c3 or not. Ada Jenkins, the specific one, is a well-funded organization. They host galas, they bring in tons of money. I think, you know, when we had all these individuals, groups come up and ask, you know, we're talking less than 1,000 people in the town of Huntersville for every group, minus Crime Stoppers and, Crime Stoppers was one of the last. That they're assisting for every bit of the groups. Gave them 20,000 last year, that's for 45. I would say, I mean, at one point, previous town board decided to start reducing taxpayer funding to organizations. And I appreciate what they do, you know, and if you want to donate your own money to an organization, whether it's these or anything else, you know, you definitely should. But I don't think it's our responsibility to willingly give taxpayer money away.
It is my understanding that they met the criteria in which the statute that allows us to give them funding.
That's correct. We did an evaluation last year, and for the most part, what they are proposing to do would fall under 160D 1311, which deals specifically with programs and services offered to low to moderate income families.
And everyone on this list.
But again, my point, it's not a matter, yes, they qualify, they may legally qualify, but it is not our money. This is not our funds. It's not like we're pulling from our wallet and saying, I want to go donate to this. We are taking it from every taxpayer in the town of Huntersville and saying, we're taking money out of your pocket, and we have decided as a board, because these individual organizations have applied for funds, that we approve giving it to them without your consent.
Board, anyone else?
The funding that we allocated to them last year, do we get accountability reports as to how they spend that money, where that money goes to?
The contract has a term that does allow us to request proof as far as their financial statements, et cetera.
Well, I'm of the opinion that we as a town got to look into the fact that we are charitable. We have a charitable aspect to us. Over the past 2 years, after COVID, during COVID, a lot of families are suffering. The increase in the consumer price index, inflation. We gave them 20,000 last year. I can't give them the full 45. I'd like to see a middle ground that we can give them. But I am for funding whatever programs they have, because they provide an essential service to our community, not only that, Davison, Cornelius, North Meck in general. So we can come to some middle ground. I would like to see a middle ground, maybe 30,000. But not to just say we're not going to give anything, it's off the table. I mean, that's just the charitable thing we can do.
Commissioner Kovacs?
I was reading in here, it says 20,000 towards salary support for staffer at a new satellite site for the LearnWorks after school. Now, if that is in Huntersville, I am in support of an increase of last year, but as Commissioner Partee said, I am not going to support the full 45.
And if memory serves, they did a survey out to our elementary schools, specifically with that LearnWorks program, and notably
1,215.
Thank you. I was like, it was over 1,000 students, and that wasn't all of our elementary schools that responded to the survey, which means there's actually more kids than that number that are behind.
Which is why that, I guess being a teacher strikes me, but because we are having to fill in the gaps for fill in the gaps for what kids missed during those 2 years of education, and I'm okay with that, but I also don't necessarily want this to be a precedent. I don't know if I want to say we're going to do 35,000 this year and every single year moving on, because this is a big jump from last year to this year.
Commissioner Boone?
I'm going to go along with the Rob on this one. I think that we need to, several years ago, we started drawing this thing down and putting responsibility back on people who want to donate to these charities. Let them donate. I can't take a taxpayer dollars and say, hey, I'm going to give money here, here, and here. In the case of Ada Jenkins, you look at we're going to use most of this money on salary. I mean, if they say anything about salary increases, I'm sure they do. Keep the people. So that's where I'm at.
I guess my question would be then, because legally we could provide this level of service, so, I mean, we could have our own department that address these things to utilize dollars. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have statutory authority to provide such services or partner with nonprofits to provide such services.
So then let me ask this question. I heard 2 no, but I heard 2 say yes, but not 45. What's the compromise?
Well, it shows that 29% of the clients are in Huntersville, so we're not even at 50%. But then the funding, 45,000 is coming from us, and the only other municipality funding is Meck County. What about the other?
For the addition?
That's what I was looking for. Because if we're not even, we're not even at a third of our residents being served, but we have the largest population, but we're being asked for a very large amount.
And I
don't think they
know
correlate.
That LearnWorks program, I want to say he said it costs, what, 200 and?
208,000, something like that.
I was thinking 215.
219.
Okay, I was thinking 215 to
Well,
run the program.
219 to 235, depending on the years, apparently.
Okay, and the students?
Well, plus 135. So it's for 23, operating expenses for LearnWorks is 148, and then salaries and related expenses is 227. Which, I don't remember who said it about the
But
volume.
and is that with the addition, because I know they've got the LearnWorks program that they will keep at Ada Jenkins, is there delineation in that paperwork that shows which one is
I'm just
more?
looking at the
Okay. So my question then is, what's the compromise? Commissioner Barty, Commissioner Kovacs?
I'm gonna stick with my suggestion of 35.
35.
35.
Commissioner Kovacs?
Like I said, if 29% is really low to me for us to be funding this much money for something that we're not even at a third at. But in the writing, it says that 20,000 will be going towards the support of a staffer at a new satellite. If that is going to be here in Huntersville, and then in turn, that 29% will be higher, then I can agree with Commissioner Partee.
So do you need more information?
I would like confirmation that that will be here, because 35,000 for 29% is.
Can we get that confirmation?
Yeah, you got that, Janet, you take notes on that so I can make sure I get the right questions. You got that? All right.
This is also not going to be a favorable statement, especially coming from me. But if we're having to put in this money to help pick up where kids have a learning gap, then we're picking up the slack from the school as well.
And we know that there are underserved families all across this county that are like that, unfortunately.
I mean, we do have the legal authority to start our own school.
I don't think that's today.
No, let's hold off on that conversation for right
I
now.
mean, we're talking about legal authority and what we can and can't do and partner and services we provide. And the basics are police, fire, education, sewer, water, utilities.
So we're gonna get confirmation back on Ada Jenkins, and then we'll move on to Angels and Sparrows. Yes, please.
They can't come for that one, either, can they? Or
Who's
they
on-
can?
I don't know
who's on
if they
Angels and
can.
Sparrows?
Angels and Sparrows, who's out?
I'm out.
Oh, you're Angels and Sparrows?
No, I am out because I have a 6 o'clock hard time. It's 20 minutes past. I have no plan.
Okay,
Take care.
be careful.
Spend tax dollars wisely, please.
Yep. Waiting on the other two. Are you good with Angels and Sparrows?
Yeah, what do you mean, can I, five,
Just
$5,000, yeah.
Angels and Sparrows?
I'm not on their board.
Huh?
I'm not on their board.
Okay. Angels and Sparrows?
Volunteer, but that's the extent. I don't see a position of any importance. Or is
I
that-
don't have anybody on that one yet.
Okay, good. All right.
Oh, we're good with that now?
No, we're
No,
checking
would
cities
they-
on the board.
Oh, okay.
No.
Get too excited yet.
No.
Yes, we're
No,
moving
we're-
on, moving to the next one.
You're normally talking in billions, not thousands then.
All right. So with, all right, so we'll move on to Angels and Sparrows.
Can we know the Ada Jenkins number? Are we allowed to know that?
Right now, it's,
We've asked for additional information.
Okay,
somewhere maybe in between,
okay.
maybe.
All right, Angels and Sparrows, last year, we budgeted 5,000. This year, they have requested 40. Conversation? Who would like to kick us off?
I'm good with 5.
Additional conversation?
I'm good with 100. Just throw out random numbers then.
Commissioner Partee, where are you at with Angels and Sparrows?
So 100 what?
100,000.
And
I was just,
No, but seriously, I'm good with the top end 40.
you're good with what?
The 40.
With the 40.
Yeah.
I've got a 5 and I've got a 40.
Mhm.
Any additional conversation? Commissioner Kovacs? Commissioner.
This is going to be the, kind of the opposite of what I said too. I know that there's an increase, as we heard, they have an increase of what they want due to an increase in programming that they want to do and stuff they want to provide. 80% of the people they serve are here in Huntersville, so it is based here in Huntersville. So I am okay with an increase compared to last year. I don't have a number, a solid number yet.
800,000 from the county.
Angels and Sparrows got
That's what Bob was
800,000.
I don't see it, yeah, I was looking to see the funding. Oh, 845,
I actually-
54,000?
It was over 800,000
Yeah, 800
for a multi-year project.
I actually looked at it
Oh,
as
yeah.
a duplication of services because Ada Jenkins was already providing those programs.
But not here.
No, they do provide it for our residents.
For 29% of them. And they're not here, like,
Physically.
yes.
However, they are pushing people out into the community as much as possible, and that seems to be their new model. You know, caseworkers going into the community. But I just thought that was
Besides the
we
soup
were
kitchen.
looking at
They
it.
had the soup kitchen, correct?
Angels and Sparrows is the soup kitchen.
That's
correct?
right, that's right.
So where are we at?
They also teach classes, like,
What, that's the other
ESOL and getting your GED, stuff like that.
service? Okay.
And they provide childcare while you're doing that.
Could we ask Bobby for the clarification on what the $850,000 project program or whatever
I
it
don't
is?
have all the details in front of me, but it was essentially like targeting kids, parents, education. It was a multi-year effort. With the ARPA funds, you get 4 years to spend the money. I don't remember if it was 2, 3, 4, but it was a multi-year effort to target upwards of 300 kids, maybe 100 adults, ESL and other educational programming, on top of support services and other things to help the families. So it was kind of a broad basket, but the education piece was sort of at the crux of it.
And was it also some form of helping them transition into longer-term housing and/or?
I do not recall if housing was part of that.
I'm trying to remember from the presentation that they made. It was taking families as a unit and trying to move them into a more sustainable, long-term viability.
Were those dollars for their new building at all that they were looking to build? I'm curious.
I'm curious too.
I don't recall capital, but if they got the money from ARPA, ARPA would have to go towards the program. I don't know that it would be able to go towards the capital.
Okay.
I'll send you all their information.
Where are we at? Commissioner Phillips?
It's hard to be able to say yes to one group and then not be able to talk about another group, because I want to be fair. So I'm not giving any opinions on these until everything's just kind of settled.
Can she just know what our suggestion of the monetary value for Angels, or for?
No, I'll just wait. I just rather,
Yeah.
I do have a general question or overarching concern. David Jenkins' number will be in the final budget.
Yes,
Am I going to be allowed to vote on that budget?
so the reason that we're discussing these now and having them enter into their contracts prior to is so that by the time that we get to the budget, it will be the total number for all external agencies, and the contracts will have already been executed versus line item number amounts for each individual nonprofit.
So theoretically, we paid $104,000 last year, and if they take this 202 and modify each individual line item, and now the number comes up to 150, rather than voting on a budget where these have specific line items, they'll have a line item maybe that says external and general fund and external and tourism, and that sums to 150, and they won't be voting on necessarily individual.
Exactly.
Thank you. That helps.
And if we don't make the decision, like I tell you, the manager's recommended budget will be exactly what they asked for last year. That's what you said, because I don't have any direction from you, so they'll get exactly what they got last year.
What was the number last year?
It's
Five.
And Commissioner Humphrey, I did look, I found the county is right up on it. There was an emergency fund to support immediate financial needs, but no reference to permanent housing.
Okay.
So it's ESL, education program, pathway tutoring for children experiencing learning gaps due to COVID-19, and ESL classes for parents, in addition to those emergency funds. And it was $854,906.
Well, my thought is, they're not, you always ask for more than what you really want. They're asking 40,000, so they're gonna take somewhere in the middle between 5 and 40. And I'm always willing to negotiate somewhere in between the median. So if they're asking, they received 5,000 last year, let's bump up to 15. I want to say 15.
Well, going based off of the comment that you made, Mayor Bales, that you think this is kind of the same as what Ada Jenkins does, then I think it needs to be comparable to what we're going to give Ada Jenkins. Because they are both, I am interested to know that if we fund both, is there any overlap of children that are getting these courses with their parents at Angels and Sparrows and going to Learn Works, or vice versa?
Or are they going to expand their net and actually have the ability to capture more? I don't disagree, I'd be interested to.
Well, then the same could be said of Caterpillar, because they do ESL classes.
Where are we at? We really do need to hone in on Angels and Sparrows this evening. I know we've asked for some information about Ada Jenkins, but if we can hammer out these last few, I think that would be great. What number are we looking at? From what I hear, it's going to be somewhere between 5 and 40, So
I'd
what,
say 30
I
to
just threw a number
35.
out, So I'm willing to go up with Commissioner Kovacs.
so.
35?
35?
I'm not acceptable.
Commissioner Boone?
Absolutely not. 5.
Commissioner Phillips?
I mean, the whole point in us taking this ARPA money, we should be balancing things, and when we had these conversations earlier, it was agreed that we would do more for the nonprofits because we tucked money away in the police department. We threw money in another project so that we could loosen the reins and make it easier on the nonprofits to receive funding. So, I mean, 35, it's not our money. I mean, really, it's coming out of the ARPA money, technically.
Because that's what we all agreed on.
We rigged the system so that these nice people didn't have to keep up with all the stupid paperwork. And then to say, oh yes, this is the intent of ARPA, and then to step away from it is disingenuous.
That's a great point.
I agree.
So do we have consensus at 35?
Yes.
Okay. The next one is Bags of Hope. Now, Bags of Hope had not asked for anything in the past, so this is a new one.
Anybody want to move back up? Board?
Oh, yeah.
Volunteer, not on board.
All right, so Bags of Hope is requesting 20,000. Any conversation around Bags of Hope? What they do and what they're asking for?
I can
I
provide some
apologize.
background on what they do. My wife actually does volunteer for them, and they provide backpacks full of food to get the children through the weekend. They deliver to the different schools, and they put them in backpacks so that there's not the stigma in theory. And do it for various other schools, obviously, all the schools within Huntersville. And I know the particular place is located in Cornelius, so I think they focus more on North Macon. Yeah. And I don't know.
Yeah, 13 of the schools are in 13 of the 26 are in Huntersville.
Yeah. And I know it was their first request for funds, and they may not have been polished, I would like them to be, but everyone has to start somewhere, and so they're going to find a way to do it, and they are doing great services to people in our town.
So where are we at? They've requested 20.
Remember the other 13 schools? Cornelius and Davidson?
Charters? Do they support charter
Bonnie
schools?
Cone,
I know this discussion is never an easy one.
It's not that, it's the fact that having worked in impoverished areas as a police officer and seeing families and children that don't have anything to eat, and you respond to calls, you go into these houses, and you just see kids just don't have what we have, what we enjoy, these families. So they provide that type of service where children get nutritional meals, then I'm all for it. Of course, I enjoy the fruits of what I've earned all my life, and I think I like I said, I'm a charitable person, I always like to give back.
Well, I will share with you a story that in one of our high schools, and I was talking with with a counselor at the time, and a young man walked up, and he was very excited, and he was very excited to share how he had just been accepted into a new program, and he was going to be able to, when he completed that program, was going to be able to take care of his family. And he said, I haven't eaten in 4 days, but I am so excited that I am going to be able to take care of my family through this program. And I thought, that's right here in Huntersville. That's here in Huntersville.
It's profound. Yeah.
And while I know that we are an affluent community, we have been blessed with a lot, there are still those that, do not have. And there are still those that we need to come up and gird up alongside and support. But again, we do need to make a decision. So the request was 20,000.
I'll just reiterate what Stacy said, Commissioner Phillips, I'm sorry. When we took the ARPA funds, we said we were going to make it so these nonprofits didn't have to go through all the strings of the ARPA funds, but we were going to recognize that we needed to do right by our community.
Right. So my question is, because we've never done business with Bags of Hope in the past, is 20,000 too much? Or is there a happy medium? Or do you want to fund it all or none at all?
I'm all for giving them 20,000 because they've never asked, and I know that they do good in our community. And the thing also is, I don't think it should be political that we have hungry kids. I think that's a level of just being good humans, and maybe the reason I asked about the other towns is I would encourage, if the schools in Davidson and the schools in Cornelius are benefiting, then I would hope those towns would also contribute to them even if they didn't ask, because they're providing a service that it's invaluable, because kids don't ask to be born and kids don't ask to grow up in what they're growing up in. So I feel like, I don't want to punish kids because of adults. And it doesn't matter what decisions their parents or guardians have made, these kids shouldn't go hungry. And I appreciate that they do it in a manner the kids aren't embarrassed. And I think that that is so important.
Well, and I do also want to reiterate that typically once they get added to the list, they come back so be prepared for moving forward.
I've been witness to programs like this, not this exact one, but I've been the teacher handing out the bags to the students for the weekends or the long breaks. And as that teacher, who worked in a severely impoverished school, it was nice to know that my kids were going to eat over the weekend or over these long breaks, and I didn't have to worry, because I was also the teacher with food in my classroom, because when they came in, they needed something to eat, and I would put stuff in their backpacks as well. So I'm in support of this.
What are we saying, though, that when we give the full amount of 20 to Bags of Hope, but you don't give the requested amount to Ada Jenkins and Angels and Sparrows? They've offered 45 and 40, and we haven't given their request. And I appreciate it, Derek, we say you like to give back to the community because you've prospered in life. But again, I've got to say that this is not my money to give to somebody. This is the taxpayers' money of this town. So I'm not going to go with a full 20. I think that we need to compromise and reduce that figure.
What's the figure?
10.
So the money that we're not giving back to these groups, do you want to give that back to the federal government or the state because it was ARPA money?
I think that's not really a correct question to ask.
I think it is.
It was part of our discussion with ARPA when we talked about surplanting.
It's absolutely part of the discussion. We specifically said when we were going to give the money for storm sewer and to the place that we recognized that we were going to do what we could to specifically give funds to agencies in need.
But listen to the conversation we've had, and Commissioner Partee said it. He said everybody over-ask, hoping to get something less than that. And right now, it seems like we're doing exactly what they've asked us to do, what they've requested.
I disagree.
Okay,
I think they asked for as much as they could justify asking for to fulfill their needs.
I was of the thought process that they asked for a number that they thought they could successfully use because they're new, and they might actually need 30 or 40, but they asked for something that they knew that they could use within the guidelines.
And they've been helping for so long and have never asked until now. Same as Caterpillar last year and Hope House last year. They never asked in Angels and Sparrows, and then they asked and we gave.
So where are we at? I heard 20, I heard a compromise of 10. Is there anything in between? We need to nail this and move on to the next one.
Can we say all those in favor of 20? Raise your hand. That's 4.
We will now move on to Caterpillar Ministries. They have, last year they requested 15, this year they've requested 20. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my sheet where I wrote Crime Stoppers down on the bottom.
Where do you want to go?
Apologies.
Sorry.
North Mech Crime Stoppers,
I've got to
2,000.
recuse myself on this.
Oh, okay.
So Mayor, we normally put that in, since I've been here, I think that's been in the police budget, chief. And I think Emily said that being that we have someone on board, we probably need to fund that. I think the chief will speak up for on this one. You know, they do good work, small amount of money. Chief, anything to add to that?
I'll tell you, Crime Stoppers solve cases, homicides, drug cases. I wish they were doing more fundraising and that we were offering $10,000 for a homicide tip. When we started Crime Stoppers, I was chief here when we started Crime Stoppers, and we were offering $1,000 for a tip then. That's still a number. That's not to say anything about us funding. I wish it was higher. I wish they were more aggressive at things, and I've spoken to them about this. It's a critical piece of our puzzle. I will tell you that.
I can piggyback off of you, Chief, because having worked homicides for 5 years, I could not have solved the case if it wasn't for Crime Stoppers. And we offer $5,000 for a tip. When those tips come in, that's how we follow up on our investigations and following down the leads, their leads that comes in. So, I mean, 2,000, I mean, that's a no-brainer, but, I mean, there should be no discussion on this one, we should just keep on going. But in order to solve a case, you gotta have information, you gotta have tips that come in.
Commissioner Phillips?
Do the other towns pitch in, do you know?
Grenades did when I was there. I don't know.
They used to do 1,000, I think. When I was there, I think it was 1,000 now. I don't know about now, but they were. I don't know about Davis.
I was gonna say, could we find out what the other towns are doing, and then if it's more than what we're giving, I think that we should equal the amount to whatever Cornelius or Davidson would give.
You're gonna be disappointed on some of these agencies then if we do that. On some of these agencies, Cornelius does not do quite a few of them.
Well, they should
Unless
take
something has
rocks.
changed since I've been there.
Well, also, we can take the lead in 2,000, because when somebody's, I mean, just you want a person to call in, you gotta get the incentive to call in. And a lot of times, they're afraid to call in because they don't know whether their names are gonna be revealed, and they don't want their names out there, so everything is confidential, but,
And Crime Stoppers, all volunteers?
yes.
Are we good with 2,000?
I was gonna say, I think, yeah, her point probably was 2,000 at a minimum.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, does it need to be 5? Because I always think about the young man that was murdered near me, and they've never solved his case, and his mom, to this day, fights to find out who killed her baby. And $3,000 makes a difference in that woman finding out who killed her kid? I mean, really, that's important stuff. I'd rather do 5.
I am so biased on this. I would rather see it be 5, but
Then I move to make it 5.
Second,
Yeah. This is a great thing.
It's not me.
that's me.
So we are moving Crime Stoppers to
5,000.
To 5,000. All right, and everyone's in agreement with that? Okay, yes, can we please bring him back?
It's ARPA money.
All right, next on the list is Caterpillar Ministries. Anybody need to recuse for Caterpillar?
Not that I have on my list.
Okay, perfect. So, there he is.
Mr. Boone, you may have to leave again.
What's that? Where we at?
Caterpillar?
No, I'm not on their board.
All right, so Caterpillar Ministries, they requested 50, we gave them 15 last year, they're requesting 20 this year. And you have all the documentation that they had turned in and during their presentation to us. What would we like to do, if anything, for Caterpillar this year?
20.
20?
expedite this thing, I know where this is headed, so all those in favor, straw vote, all those in favor of 20, raise your hand. All those opposed.
Thank you, Commissioner Wood. Cutting to the chase. Hope House, they requested, they received 10 last year, they're requesting 20 again. How much did they request last year, do we know?
Hobats?
Okay.
No, how much did they request? And did we, right,
I think they asked for 10 and we gave them the 10.
that's what I was thinking. I was
Because I
just
think-
Because they lowballed themselves, them and Caterpillar
Yeah,
did.
because you said that you wished they
Yeah.
would have asked for more.
So,
Yeah.
they've requested 20. Any discussion around giving the 20? Or would you like to reduce that amount? Is there a straw poll for 20? All right. Now we will move down into the tourism dollars. Now, these are dollars that will come out of our tourism fund. So we'll start with Carolina Raptor. We funded them at 20,000 last year. They've requested 20,000 again this year. Any discussion around that one?
I thought last year when we gave them the 20,000, I thought it was kind of like a one and done. So,
Never remember.
but that was my agreement with everybody, was that I wasn't gonna fight it because I thought it was a one and done, so I'm not okay with 20,000 for them.
Is there a different amount?
I asked for the numbers about the avian flu and what they're doing for, to protect the flocks around here and stuff. I would be comfortable giving them maybe 5,000 to offset the cost of the avian flu and to make sure that we pad them a little bit, because I think that's only fair, because they're keeping with their program and following protocols and biosecurity and hazard. What they're doing is making sure that if anybody who has backyard flocks in our community, that their poultry, their birds don't get sick. So at least offset what they've spent keeping our birds safe.
So what's that figure?
About 5,000.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Commissioner Munger?
I would, part of what I'm trying to understand here also is tourism dollars are kind of hard to get into different places. And so I would throw out a proposal of 10,000 as a compromise, just because it can be more difficult to appropriate tourism dollars.
I have places in here I want to put the money from tourism.
And perhaps you could just highlight some high-level things where you think tourism dollars could otherwise be spent.
Alrighty, I can roll with that really quick. I think that the bathrooms at Berry Park, because as I sit on Visit Lake Norman, and we roll out all this data about, well, we've had 5 states and teams from here and there, I think that justifies using tourism dollars for the bathroom at Berry Park. I think the HAP amphitheater, I think tourism dollars could cover something like that, because it's supposed to draw people in. What else? Anything that I can go back through Visit Lake Norman and say we've brought in other people from different states, I think in the CIP should be tourism dollars. And then let's offset that out of our taxes and
Do we
stuff.
not already do that, though? Those are already earmarked for tourism dollars, are they not?
They may be, it just depends on, if they're out here, we're not trying to get too far out on those, because who knows what may happen, and maybe triple the price if it's way out there, so. But yes, we look at tourism versus how we should maneuver that, because tourism is not a huge line.
Right.
And you can eat up tourism on one project real quick. How much fund balance tourism we got now, a couple million?
Yeah.
So 2 projects could wipe that completely out, so that's why we have to think through some of those. But she's right, I mean, it could qualify for tourism if we're putting heads in beds per se.
Correct. So I heard 5, I've heard 10, where are we at?
I like 5.
Seems like I'm in the minority.
It's about time.
I'm okay with 5.
5,
I'll go with the flow.
okay. Hugh Torrance, who has to recuse?
I do.
Me?
Okay. 5, good.
And I'm recused from Roll Hill, so I just won't come back in.
Okay.
Ever.
Out of curiosity,
Just kidding.
three of us vote for something, does she have to vote as well?
We're not voting right now, we're just doing
Straw poll,
consensus.
three to none?
So we would have to essentially bring it back if we don't have a majority.
Ultimately, what I'm gonna do is on these numbers, is what I'm gonna put in the manager's recommended budget with that. But I see that hand to it.
All right, so let's talk about Hugh Torrance House and Store. They, we gave them 12,000 last year, they're requesting 15,000 this year. All of the new programming that they are bringing into the Hugh Torrance House and Store in Cedar Grove. I think it's been pretty impressive to see what they've accomplished up to this point.
In our historical programs too, which covers the gambit of cultural
Correct.
aspect of what happened here in Huntersville, so.
I think it's interesting that they've only gone up such a small amount, even though it's now encompassing a whole entire, another portion.
So where are we at?
I like the 15,000. They're asking for a $2,000 increase.
Is there, I know at one point, kind of trying to follow along where Hugh Torrance House is going, and I know Cedar Grove's kind of entering the equation. At one point, there was discussion that they were possibly going to become like a Mecklenburg County entity. I'm just trying to.
I believe that they were looking to connect to
Each
but-
other.
each other.
I know it's not right now, but
Right.
we see a path. I'm just trying to figure out, is it going down that path? Is it?
I don't know that it's going down the path of where it's turned over to the county, no.
I think
I don't
Abigail
think
and their team Hearts, you know, they're, you see some of the programs that they're taking to the whole, which is, thank God she didn't know, because it has a real chance. So they're doing a good job.
I wouldn't argue against whatever you say.
Are we at 15? That's what I heard.
Yep.
And I can do 15.
We're gonna drag Dan down.
Yep, so we'll Hill. Thank you. Commissioner Boone, welcome back. We're gonna have a conversation around Rural Hill. We have funded them 20,000 the last, I feel like it's the last couple of years.
It's pretty much equal.
We typically fund them 20,000 a year. So they've not asked for any more, any less?
It might be the only group.
I think so, I think it is the only group.
Yeah.
Where are we at with the 20,000?
I'll go with 20,000.
Commissioner Kovacs? 20. Commissioner Boone?
I'll go 15, but I'd be in a minority there, so.
Okay, so I think that we've found some consensus around our external agencies and our tourism dollars. If we can, before we move forward, can we take a 5-minute break, please? And
We
we'll
may
come-
not be able to get to all of them, depending on how long you can go, we may.
Well,
may only do one
yes,
more.
let's take 5 minutes, please.
Been gone for 5 minutes.
I know, you guys just recuse yourself, you wouldn't have to take breaks.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Thank you all for that 5 minutes. I greatly appreciate it. We are going to move on to the air filtration. Is that correct?
Lance's favorite.
Yeah, I feel like Zach's been patiently waiting, maybe we'll hit this one. Could be, could take a while.
Oh, okay.
And Mayor, there are 2 others, but maybe what we'll do is if we get through the air filtration, maybe we can get the other 2 at the board meeting, or we talk a little bit about it, but I know the manager's recommended budget is coming out on May 2nd.
Yes, sir.
But, I mean,
7 calendar days.
Yes.
one of them will take a few seconds, and the other one, capital projects, we can talk more about that one. We can modify that as we go through the budget process if we need to.
Okay.
Zach, you want to take a shot at it?
Sure, yeah, I'll do a kind of a quick overview. I know there's a lot of information that was, this generalized information that was put on the sheets here. Really, the admin discussion is the air handling units that handle the pool spaces at HMFA are branded, they're Dectron units. They are a brand of units that are available for purchase that do provide air conditioning services in pool spaces. Now, when I say air conditioning, I'm not talking about temperature only. I'm also talking about humidity control, exhaust, and things of that nature. So the first few snapshots on there are really just about what the historical was of what brought the Dectrons into the facility. A group by the name of Southern Mechanical Solutions is who installed the units. Certainly Dectron made the units, and then there was a separate engineering firm that was consulted at that point for the design of that space. There's 2 large units that service the large pool, 1 unit that services the smaller pool. Since we were operating in the facility in 2017, the units have not worked at 100%. We've always pursued that as a corrective action. However, there's always been hurdles that have been placed in, non-monetary, but there have been hurdles and things that have just continuously, at least cyclically, have not worked or broken. So, over the years, we have consulted with a couple different groups to come in and provide corrective action and recommendations, and I've listed some of those groups down below. Hahn Mason is the local, or excuse me, Hoffman is the local group that provides the parts. So they are more of that direct line contact with Dectron as the overall rep. The interesting thing in regards to timing of everything is that Dectron was purchased by another larger group that now services and provides Dectron, Ceresco, Pool Pack. There's one more that the names escape me. So at this point, we have attempted to be in contact with the parent company of Dectron. We've been in contact with our current individuals that have been servicing the units over the years. And we've also attempted to go the route of Hoffman, who has, or arguably should have, a little bit more of a direct line of communication with the parent company to see if we can get Dectron to help answer some of the issues that we have not only been experiencing, but also as of late have had some larger failure points that I'll just say Dectron is not capable of providing solutions for in order for us to get the large pool units operational at all. Right now, the large pool units are pushing air, but they are not conditioning to a degree that would be normal in that situation, or even to a percentage of normal. So we have, year over year, since we've been averaging somewhere between $125,000 to $150,000 of expense in just repairs. That's motor repairs, compressor repairs, things of that nature. That does not include the general service costs that we have with coming in and doing spring maintenance, fall maintenance, filtration, some of those things. So that's in excess of that. Now there is a little bit more on the screen. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, just make sure everyone can see that. In the more immediate, we've attempted to do some short-term mitigation in all spaces. One of the earliest means of mitigation was just providing fresh air, which is opening the doors on those pool spaces. The challenge with that is that that is not in 100% compliance with the health department's code of pool operations. So we have worked on solutions to try and help mitigate that, so that we can provide a appropriate airflow into the space. We have now resorted to opening up the doors to the units on the roof daily, so that we can bring in as much fresh air as possible into the space so that it can just be exhausted out of the space. All that is doing is similar to you sitting in a parking lot and opening your car windows and trying to have some form of airflow. It is not necessarily pushing air in and out of that space. It's just providing some of that potential ingress and egress that you wouldn't get with the doors closed. We also have been adding in ground level fans. This year we did put in 3 larger fans on the floor level that are able to move a much larger group of air in the space, in and out of the space. We also just recently completed the project to add 2 ceiling fans into the space, again, to try and help circulate more air in and around the box, if you will. We are pursuing potential other options for short-term mitigation. Really the 2 options that we have 3 options. One would be to stay where we're at, do nothing, and continue to utilize the material supplies and strategy that we have to date. Secondary option would be to try and add more exhaust and potential crossflow into the space, which would be essentially layman's description, kind of holes in the walls, kind of holes in the ceiling, and attempting to try and exhaust and move more air than we can currently move at this current time. Third option for short term is to rent units to help do forced air and 100% exhaust air so that it can help control humidity in the space. The reason why that is something that's been recommended is simply because of the humidity that will be sent off from the use of the pools and certainly in the outside environment. Just by bringing in the outside air as it sits in the middle of the summer, certainly will be more humid than we experience in the fall, winter, and even spring. And so there is some heavy recommendation to consider, if we're moving down a short-term path, the potential for renting units for at least the duration of the summer. Rental of the units would be pushing closer to that $200,000 to $250,000 mark to rent units for the duration of the summer to help provide at least some form of what I'll call fresh, controlled, reduced humidity air into the space. We've now, over the past few weeks and months, meeting with various groups, engineering groups, and the like, so that they can provide some form of solutions outside of just repairs and what exists out there in the environment and what exists at other similar type locations. If we can scroll down just a little bit more. And they've come forward with some ballpark numbers. Now these numbers, or that number that you see in that top bullet point, the 3.25, is to replace all 3 units. Be basically going up and taking all 3 units off the roof, replacing them with either same brand, whatever brand is recommended and agreed upon. And depending on the group, they are recommending not necessarily the replacement of the ductwork, but potential adding in of ductwork. Sock ductwork, sorry. A lot of variations of words there. Sock ductwork that is more standard as you move into newer natatoriums due to its ability for its lower cost, lighter weight, and better ability to disperse air. Again, it will depend on the group, will depend on what they would recommend. We have looked at a few locations here locally. We went toward the County Aquatic Center, the Eastway Center, and the New North Mac Center to get a better understanding on, at least in those locations, what they've been using, the challenges they've seen, if any, their experience with some of the other groups, because none of those locations utilize Dectron, as well as some of the other mitigation items that they may have or have not been put into place. One of those things that they have started to add in is things like UV filtration. That's simply because that'll help to reduce the overall chemical load in the space. Arguably as to whether or not that would reduce the amount of chloramines and off-gassing that happens in the pool when you have large beta loads. The other thing for these new units that is more desirable from a cost operating standpoint because they are more heavily glycol-based as opposed to Freon. One of the things that we have been taxed with from a repair standpoint is anytime there's a leak or any loss of Freon due to replacing the compressors in those areas, we have to pay for all that poundage of Freon to come back in, and Freon is getting rapidly more expensive as we move along. So not to say that these units are 100% Freon free, but they are a much reduced load as compared to what we're currently using. So if the board were to vote, certainly not tonight, but if the board were to decide that a full replacement was the final route to go, I kind of put a little bit of a timeline that we've been hearing from a lot of the groups as to how long this might take to get them installed. And the easiest way to describe it is it would be about a year. It would be anywhere from, at best, 9 months, more likely sometime within that next year, the decision will be made, just due to the RFP process, design process. Manufacturing is certainly, we've been hearing time and time again, it's right around that 6-month time frame. And then they believe they would be able to get the units done in about a month's time.
Questions? Commissioner Kovacs?
So that, say, we said that you could do the 3.25 million and do a complete overhaul of that. We would also have to add in the fact that we would have to spend that 250 for rentals for this summer since it would take a year.
Correct.
So we'd be approving more. How long have, it said $150,000 a year roughly for repairs. How many years have we already been paying $150,000?
4 years. We're moving into 5 right now.
So we're already $750,000 in the hole in just repairs alone, plus what this rent, so $1 million without fixing anything at all. How long would a replacement last if you did everything?
So it should give us anywhere, it's a broad range, I guess is the best way to put it. You should be able to safely say at least 15 years.
The shelf life of an electron unit is 15 years?
I wouldn't call it an Electron, yeah.
Well, you would go to another.
Would we get a warranty this time?
I don't think you'll get a 15-year warranty.
Not 15, but
Yeah, and there was a warranty on the original Dectron. I have to go back and look at exactly what all that entailed. Typically, most of those warranties are 1 year. Some of them will push to 3.
what a joke.
That's kind of standard,
It's like a
depending on
refrigerator.
where this comes into play is that as you go through the RFP process, certainly there will be a lot of variations in regards to the types of compressors, the amount of compressors, the type of warranty, the type of labor warranty you may or may not have, to all derive a price they feel will be competitive.
So how long could we sustain just doing the $150,000 a year in repairs? How long would that system last if we just keep making repairs as needed?
Well, the problem is right now is we've already spent about that amount this budget year, and we are, one way to say it, dead in the water on the large pool space. The only thing that works are the fans in that space.
So it cannot be used currently?
We are utilizing what it can be, but it is not conditioning what
So
it's designed to do.
Just a big fan right now.
Correct.
Can they have a swim meet there right now?
Sure.
I think that's why we
Okay.
It's like a Band-Aid on the unit every year.
Yeah, to just give a little bit of a better description, the biggest thing those units do is provide fresh air, right? The challenge that you have is that in the fall and winter, it's a lot easier to do that process because temperatures are low. And with what's been working on the units is we're able to provide heat, because that comes from external boilers. So when all we have to do is provide that fresh air into the space, and that fresh air is 30, 40, 50 degrees, it's a lot easier to maintain a more comfortable environment inside the space. As we inch closer to the summertime, and your average temps are 80s, 90s, now you're trying to push that same 80, 90 degree air into a space you're trying to maintain closer to 75, 80 degrees. So right now, they are large fans essentially that are trying to push in and exhaust fresh air.
And what does that do with the chemicals that are sitting on the water for those swimmers too?
So we are, with the other short-term mitigations that have been put in place, and with obviously a tight control on chemicals, we are certainly moving a lot of those, their chloramines are the ones that most people talk about. We are exhausting them out of that space. Certainly it could be more efficient than what is happening right now. Where that is kind of a tipping point is when you do have a swim meet in the space and you're not able to truly exhaust at speed. That's when you start to have to really try and strategize either short-term mitigation or arguably even the meet flow to guarantee bather loads, break periods in between to allow that air to attempt to escape.
So are we, go ahead.
I have a bunch of questions, why don't you go ahead?
I was just going to ask, are we at any health risk right now moving forward on the Band-Aid effect that, we're just sort of fixing what we can, and even when we fix it, we're at 50% or 60% of what it, should do, we can do. I mean, is there any, thresholds we got to meet to stay, to be healthy, I guess? Any liability?
There is not a standard measurement that exists to say the air should be X amount in that pool space versus the hallway. However, you will find that if, let's say we kept the doors closed and just had the fans on, you'll find that more airway distress would be experienced in the space. Not that it's depleting oxygen, but certainly when you are utilizing higher lung capacity to swim, and in that space, you'll find that it is a little bit more abrasive, similar to running outside in the cold, or similar to running outside, even in the spring with heavy pollen load. They'll find it's a different experience overall.
Have we had any complaints from? Okay. So that could potentially harm the incoming, or the stuff that's booked if we weren't to fix this?
It is not a matter of discussion, I would say, with incoming groups as to the status of our capabilities or non-capabilities. There's arguably a perceived assumption that the environment is managed well enough to hold large events, small events, any events.
Commissioner Munger, you have questions?
Yeah, I have a bunch. Are we currently measuring air quality inside there right now?
No.
Why not?
There's not a controlled way for us to be able to do that.
We need to figure it out. That, it's an area of concern. I know that there's not a specific measurement, but at some point, someone falls over, has some sort of adverse reaction, is not the time that we need to preemptively be understanding how bad the air quality is in there. What was the original install date on that? Was it 17 or 18?
Was going into early 17.
Early
16 and 17.
Okay.
Bobby, there was a bid award in 2015 for our current system.
That's right.
Okay. How much revenue is generated by swim teams and any other swim revenue on an annual basis?
I'll have to go back and check the exact number, but I would say 750,000.
750,000, so in theory,
4 years.
this pays for itself in
4
4
years.
plus. Assuming.
When the
it's
warranty's
just
out.
Pure Dectron that we're paying for.
Break even first.
Right.
Well, it pays for itself in 4 years if you don't take into
If you
account
don't
what we
take into
pay
account
to fix it or
anything
rent
else.
it, yeah.
Yes, 100% agree. Acknowledge that. Is there any way to insure this? To get a specific insurance policy that says if this fails, they will compensate us for a replacement?
That's a great question. I do not know the answer. I have to look at that.
What you can do though is, you'll see, you can look at some of these that have maintenance programs on them, built into the contractor for whoever you awarded to. What I would say here is, one company designed, one company installed, and they're all doing this here.
Right.
So that was a cluster you can put in the next couple of words.
So, just so I'm 100% clear, we are buying a Dectron from the Dectron company to replace a Dectron, no?
No, no unit has been decided, no official path has been decided.
Gotcha.
So, the world is our oyster in regards to decisions.
As long as Dectron is not in that race car, I'm okay.
I oddly am kind of open to the idea that you kind of randomly mentioned in there, punching holes in the walls and the ceilings. You get some quick fix, free flowing air. Because this is a money pit, and I'm not a huge fan of us pursuing this. I think that's the majority of my questions.
Commissioner Partee?
My question is, are we losing any competitive meets to the other aquatic centers?
Not at the current time, that I'm aware of.
Is that a threat that we're looking at as far as losing what we have? We have a clientele that
It's got the same size pool.
use our meets, use our facility for meets.
There is, that has not been stated directly to me. There is certainly that concern if there is a more desirable environment elsewhere that is as cost efficient. You know, certainly they may pursue options. That's not something that's been discussed with us. You know, we have only recently reached the point where the units are exhaust fan units versus conditioning units. That has only been within the last 4 months, I'd say, that we've been in that dire straits on the units for the large pool space.
How much revenue do the meets generate for us as a town?
So it depends on the size. So I would say on average per year, anywhere from 70,000 to 100,000 a year.
On the meets? You mentioned Freon, which is used in the compressors. Isn't Freon a banned substance because of the environmental?
So there are, that's part of where the cost is coming into play, because it's a very specific formula of Freon that they're allowed to use. My understanding as to what part of what's driving that cost is there is a stockpile. They're just not making any more. So we're just one of those users that taps into that stockpile.
So ultimately, we would have to move away from this anyway.
Yeah, now I don't have an estimate on how many years that could be down the road. But it is something that at this point, my understanding is they're no longer manufacturing it, but there is some form of stockpile available until machinery fully ages out.
Commissioner Phillips?
Okay, so the installation for 3 units is 1 month. Would you have to close the pools?
Depends on the month. There might be a small interruption of service. To be honest, with what we've been operating with right now, no. I think we would be able to do a short-term mitigation while they clean them out.
Okay. Do you guys have any friends or family that work for the companies that you guys are talking to? Okay. I guess I just have to be the jerk right now. So my concern with investing this chunk of change in something like this, we got the new rec center opening. They come in, they purge all your customers. They purge your swim teams, your swim meets. We're sitting on $4 million of junk. Can you resell those?
Probably not likely, because they are going to be engineered specific to the building. Here's what I would say, though, in regards to that concern. The North Mech Center is not designed for swim meets. There's 0 seating on their competitive pool space. Certainly, they have the parking and other facilities inside the space, but it is not designed, and my understanding was not necessarily thought of as a meet-capable location.
But we only,
Certainly-
what, 70,000 a year you said for meets?
Yeah, the largest user group that we have in there year-round is where the largest amount of money comes from for rental of the space. The swim meets overall can range anywhere from $2,000 to $25,000, or even the dive event that brought in a little over $35,000. So it really depends on the size and types of needs that are coming into the space. We will, no matter what decision is made, still compete with the County Aquatic Center, Greensboro, and then certainly any of the others that are in and around the state.
So, like, maybe to you guys, I feel like such like a grim reaper right now, but I wonder if we shouldn't wait to really talk about what kind of investment we're gonna make if we're gonna take the easy route or the expensive route. Maybe wait 3 months, let North Mech open, see what happens, jump in ships, and then go from there? Because
The one decision that I would recommend that we talk through is short-term for summertime. Because we don't have a great solution for handling the heavy heat that's about to come without, a decision from you all in some aspect on what route we should go from there.
do you guys, so my question with the summer in this situation, do you guys have an issue or a potential issue for Legionnaires of mold?
I think certainly, so Legionnaires, I would argue to say no, as long as we're maintaining the pool spaces appropriately. That would be more waterborne than would be airborne. Mold, yes. Because of the high humidity, there certainly would be an opportunity for mold to test.
If we were to do the 3.25 million fix, would there be opportunity to host more meets?
There would. We would then, at that point, only be bound by the size of the space. Just seating, pure seating in the space.
Commissioner Booth?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Zach, you said you toured the new North Mech Rec Center. What kind of air filter system do they use for their pool?
So it's an InnoVent system. So that is, it might be on there somewhere. It's the same system or similar system that they put in the Eastway Center as well. A little bit of a different setup. They're all unique in their own aspect and own right. To be frank, they gave some recommendations on units they have used or are currently in use and are not fans of. At the current time, that everyone we've spoken to about the events with Met County have been pleased with its operation.
You know how much it costs to put it in North Mech for that system?
No, we can talk
Well, I feel that we've got a big competitor that's going to open up right up the street from us. And if we're going to make a fix, now's the time to do it, because there will be some members that'll lose HFFA, but I think the future is in swim meets and having more competitive use of the big pool and the seating that nobody else seems to have, especially the diving area. So whatever we decide to do, I think we need to do it sooner than later.
Commissioner Martinez?
I want to agree with Commissioner Boone. Commissioner Boone and I, we're there in the morning, Zach, you see us there.
Yeah.
And I see the majority of the clientele that uses the pool are our age. And they are concerned with the breathing and the air filtration, the air circulation within the pool area, which is a concern, which can be very dangerous for seniors.
Sure.
And seniors are more active now. And I think I agree with Commissioner Boone on that aspect.
Food for thought.
Something more now than later.
Commissioner Munger?
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep jumping back to this. How do we know how bad the air is if we're not testing it? I mean, there has to be a way to know what contagions are in there, whatever is in the air. And if we're just saying, well, it seems kind of bad, I mean, how do we know?
Have you guys had an IAQ specialist come out?
We did, I think 3 years ago.
Could we maybe budget for one of those to come out again?
Sure.
Okay.
Here's what I would say, even going to your comment, the one thing that we do know is we can't control humidity, we can't control temperature. Those are two things.
Based on the current system that we have in place right now, the failing system.
Yeah, correct. So it's even more so contagions in the air and being able to, mitigate those, because some of those can certainly be mitigated by just pure exhausting the space, almost like a warehouse. Hence why we have even entertained looking at just putting more holes in the building to try and exhaust. And so those, I think, hands down, we would be able to keep at a reasonable level, provided we can continue to exhaust in any weather environment. It now comes back down to overall temperature of the space and humidity of the space, which can't be easily exhausted just by putting holes in the building.
And are we sure that if we do a complete replacement, because I know one of the biggest issues with the Dectrons was the ductwork, right? Are we convinced that additional ductwork will work?
So the ductwork that's in a lot of the spaces now are same size. So the way HFA was designed in that space is it's a looped system. And so the way steel ductwork works is that as it gets further away and it needs to provide the same percentage of airflow, if you will, the ductwork shrinks to allow more of that flow. The sock duct system is a consistent sizing around the whole space, or cylinders that come out over the space. Because they don't have as much restrictive airflow, they're able to arguably put the same amount of airflow out at full length as they would at close length. Now, science, obviously, I can't speak maybe more detail than that, but certainly that's what we've seen so far, and that's what's been described to us, that things like the sock ductwork would be able to do.
And do you think that the current ductwork really is one of the reasons the Dectron units are failing? Or are there other issues with the Dectrons?
So I do think, as we've gotten more and more down this path, that there is a list of items that I think are kind of stacking up to create larger issues. So we've heard recommendations in regards to the ductwork, the size of the fans that are feeding those ducts, the exhaust that's on the opposite side, and the length of the ductwork on the roof outside of those units, and how they're shaped and sized. We've heard from some of the earliest issues that we dealt with were on the motors. It was the ball bearings, because they were steel ball bearings, and they're getting corroded and seizing. And certainly there's, I don't know how many miles of piping that exists that's all soldered together in regards to the units coming in. One of the reasons why some groups like the Innovent units is simply because they are packaged from the factory. The Dectron units were as packaged as they could have been. And arguably, I would say, while I didn't see the install, I would say they were more packaged than a lot of units because they are on an open roof. A lot of the units that we've seen so far are inside the building, so they have either big doors on the side or they built it and built the roof over top of it, so they came more sectional. The units that we have, however, need these large, what's called cooling trays, cooling fans, and all of that piping needed to be soldered on site to match up. And so there's been, failure points with that over the years. So I think, again, to bring it back, I think there's quite a few items that are kind of compounded over each individual unit. The plus side is that we right now have the smaller pool unit operating at about 80% capacity. So I was just going to throw that out there as general food for thought, that the smaller unit is included in when you're talking all the numbers, right? And certainly that could be an option as well, to say we would only target the large pool space, not the small pool space, and then continue to make repairs on the small pool space month over month.
When you enumerate the eccentricities of your pool compared to other places that you've toured, are there other places that you've toured, do they have that 17-foot depth pool and the height of the ceiling because of the dive area? Is that comparable to what the other places you've toured, or is that a uniqueness that you'll need to deal with that might be causing you issues associated with air filtration?
So the County Rec Center is comparable. Greensboro is comparable. The two newer locations, Eastway and North Neck, are not comparable. I believe North Neck's deepest is 7 feet. They don't have a dive well or anything like that. The difference for them, both of those locations, one of the things that creates the increased humidity and the potential off-gassing is water aeration. And so when they have those kids play structures indoors, and they have those spray fountains and ground level fountains, all those create increased evaporation or increased humidity, increased chloramines without any data. So there's a little bit of a give and take in regards to that. Our sizing certainly, I don't know that depth per se is as concerning as much as it is surface area of water that we would have to control some of that off-gassing from.
So if the board were to choose to only replace 2 of the 3, what cost is that?
So the easy math is it could potentially drop. Because the unit's smaller, it wouldn't necessarily reach that full $1 million to split it into thirds. The estimate right now would be about $700,000.
Commissioner Booth?
Final question, and this is for Anthony Roberts. In the contract with HFFA, if we're going to put all this money into it, if we decide to go that route, will we have to renegotiate that contract since they have a performance clause in it?
We probably need to look back at that,
Hadn't looked at it in a while to see, there's a lot of capital money we'll be putting towards it. I know they pay for small amounts of capital, but not 3.25 million. They do the $50,000 clicks per year kind of deal. So we will be putting up a ton of capital money.
Commissioner Phillips?
Is there like a way we could have somebody come out and check the structural building to make sure it's sound? Because what I'm really concerned about is we're gonna throw all this money at it and it's just gonna be putting lipstick on a pig. Because it's gonna end up being the duct work, or there's not proper insulation, or this or that. So if we can have some kind of professional come check it out, because I'm not trying to sit here, have a year warranty, and this thing go out in 3 years, and then we're back to blowing money. That's a lot of money, especially when you do have competition building up. That's a lot of money.
So Jack and them had several, so the companies want to come out and tell you what their opinions are.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you could get to a point where you get them to do an RFP or whatever, and bring you something back that the board can make a decision on. You're not going to get a 15-year warranty on an AC unit out, and like I said, I don't think you would get a 5-year warranty on any type of unit.
But like going back to the duct system and all that, like, okay, this thing sucks, it's sucked for years, then you got mold growing in your ducts and that gets discovered, and that's gonna need to be replaced. I'm big on mold because of working environmental health and safety. Like, I saw black mold end up causing people to end up in the hospital and to get permanent disability. And if we're just gonna keep throwing money at a problem, it's gonna continue to be a problem. We gotta find a better avenue.
I think if you're gonna do it, you're gonna replace the whole system. I think ductwork, probably units, everything. And then to leave the other unit off, assuming they're small units, the Dectron, and then if you have...
It's gonna crap out too.
And I don't know all the details on that one, but if you pick another system to talk to the Dectron too, I don't know how that's gonna play out. Maybe
That's like only
separate.
replacing like 2 tires when you need 4. That makes no sense.
So, it's a mess.
A mess.
At the end of the day, the town owns HFFA, regardless of whether anyone sitting here would have put it there or not. And we want to make sure that if we own it, that we're maintaining it.
Do we have to own it?
We own the building, the county owns the land. I would certainly ask for an assist from Emily. I believe our lease with the county suggests that it be operated as a recreational facility. I'm not, with the county owning the land, I'm not sure what our short-term options would be.
Maybe a basketball court, skateboard park and one of the pools.
I had somebody ask me about a skateboard park yesterday, so don't threaten me with a good
I'm
time.
just kidding, I'm just kidding.
So what do you need from us this evening?
We gotta have some direction at some point in time, or else we're gonna keep believing, the system's coming in, pumping in $150,000 per year, and we've already pumped in, sounds like almost at already.
Plus
And-
250 over
And
the
it's
summer.
not gonna get any better.
I think that what Zach asked is rental equipment, first of all, for the summer months.
Because that has to be done
And
regardless.
that's what,
Yeah, we have no
200,
choice.
250, just for a summer rental?
Yeah, that's an estimate. That estimate would take you from May, if they do it as fast as they can in May, through September, or into September at least.
Do we have consensus on that one? The
Do
250?
we have consensus on
We
250?
don't, yeah.
Yeah.
And once,
People gotta breathe.
once we have that installed, maybe June, July, we can have IAQ specialists come out. That way we know what we're really dealing with. I'm sorry, I'm that nerd, but stuff like that,
I want to clarify. IEQ,
indoor air quality.
thank you so much.
Zach, on the rental units, do they basically rolled in AC units?
Yes. Right now it would be, if I remember the numbers correctly, 2 60-ton units. So we need to discuss even where they would go. Those numbers would include them bringing those units on site, tying into building power, tying into the external ductwork that exists so they can force air in and then do a full exhaust out. In short, the first month is a little bit of an extra upfit due to that extra work that needs to be done, and then every month after that is smaller. And that would then, what I would say is that if we are going to move down the route of that rental, we would not move forward with the other exhausting options in the space. We would not move forward with doing the roof cutting and any of the wall work.
So with that, let me just ask you this, so could you do that on just for the summer? So let's just say we're trying to get through 250 each year, and we decided to keep the Dectron that really does not a whole lot of anything, and you just did 250 a year in the summer, and you did that, is that gonna take away some of this $150,000 per year in addition, Dectron stuff that we gotta continue to maintain?
I would say yes. If we're not going to replace the motors and compressors, and just leave it as just fan units, then correct. We would not be spending money on the replacement of those internal units.
It would give us an idea of exactly what that air quality could be.
And it would be the equivalent of 13 years at $250,000 a year. Just saying that the
You
replacement
mean
Dectron.
leaving them?
Well, if we're talking about replacing this for $3.25 million years, or $2.5 million, and it may last 15 years, or we could do 250 a year. I get 13 years out of 250 a year.
Guaranteed.
Exact same amount as $3.25 million.
What's the downside to that?
I'm just,
I'm asking.
downside, I mean, maybe you lose 2 years, maybe you gain 5. The 250 is a known, the 3.25, got a 1-year warranty.
So are we good with, at the very least, moving forward with the 250 for the fix, the Band-Aid fix?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, and then when do we need to make a
Figure out
decision?
whatever process we
Yes.
have to do and all, but yes, we can get down that path.
All right. There you go. Thank you.
We probably need to wrap up. Yep.
Yeah.
I can hit, so on the bond, on the referendum, we still just need to make sure, are we doing November 23 or November of 22?
You really want to have this discussion tonight?
I don't know if that's going to take long.
We need to have this discussion tonight.
Or
We need to make a
Or we can
decision.
wait to, I guess, I don't know if we have a pre-meeting, the next pre-meeting. I know Janet needs, she needs to stay and work, 15 hours a day, not 10 or 12. I'm messing with her.
I will punch him just
She knows I got to rev her a little bit, but, so we could do a pre-meeting and talk about that.
Do we have anything else on the docket for a pre-meeting?
So just to let you know, on employee pay for, we talk about CIP, COLA and all that, you will see a 7%. That's COLA and merit combined. Right now, we're looking at somewhere between 5 or 6% COLA, 1 and 2 merit. So 7% total, combo 5261. So that's what you'll see in the manager's recommended budget. What we're doing is continue to analyze other places and towns and what they're doing, and we gather that information through the league or through other sources, and make sure we're at least, right now, it's looking like we're ready to average, maybe above, but we're not blowing it out of the water.
All right, so that, we're gonna talk about that at pre-meeting.
Well, you'll pretty much see that in the manager's recommended budget.
Okay.
Unless you give me some other direction. I'm just trying to keep up with what the other towns are.
Okay.
At least be average with them, maybe slightly above. But we're not blowing it out of the water, and you'll see that. I mean, you've already seen what the CPI, you've seen what the federal government has done with Social Security. There's
Social Security in calendar 22 was an
6.7
increase of
or
5.9.
5.9, I'm sorry. So those figures out there that we're looking at.
Medicare one, Joe.
All right, so we'll circle back to CIP.
Yeah, we'll look back at
Pre-meeting.
CIP
Is
and
it
pretty.
punchy? Nobody's had dinner.
I'll just put it out there. So our next meeting, a week from tonight, is the normal first board meeting in May, and that will include the manager's recommended budget, and putting the 4.8 ARPA funds in the budget. We're still using fund balance. I'd like a little bit of a redo. I don't think I was as clear as I would like to have been about CIP and bonds. And so I don't want to go home and hungry and not be able to sleep tonight without paying or somebody. We go down to the bottom of this document. I am concerned that I've left you with the impression that the only thing we need to consider issuing bonds for is anything in this future column, which sums to 82 million. Don't go home thinking that, because there are multiple projects that we have slated funded in 24 and 25. I would direct your attention to row 78, where it says transportation referendum and parks and rec referendum. FY 24 contemplates that we would also need 13.5 million in transportation bonds in projects that we have funded in 24. November of 23 is 5 months into FY 24. So if you sum what's in row 24 and 25, that's transportation referendum, that's 18 million. And if you sum what's in parks and recreation referendum for 24 and 27, that's 2.2 million. So big picture, when you think about how much you might want to put in a referendum, you need to go looking at those projects that are in future column that sum 82 million, plus you need to be thinking about the 20 million that is transportation and parks and rec. So there are projects on this list in the neighborhood of $100 million. So if you thought it was just 82, don't be misled, because it's 82 plus 18 and 2, so ballpark 100.
During our last meeting, you had mentioned the number 66 million.
Yes.
What was the basis for that number?
It needs to be more than 50 if you're serious about these projects. If it's, and when you go for a referendum, I encourage you, don't plan on going multiple times in a short period of time. When voters approve debt, you can issue it any time within 7 years, and you can get an additional 3, so there's a total of 10 years. So don't think about what you just need for 2 or 3 years. Think about what you might need for 10.
So if I look at the numbers that you just mentioned, I'm looking at about 103 million total.
Ballpark?
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Boone?
Let's look at this town hall for $17 million, and that's part of your recommend.
That's part of what I would recommend you think about issuing some debt on.
Okay, but a building, you could take that 17 million and go to the debt market and get a mortgage on that building. True?
True. I can wax poetically, accounting-wise, on what you might do. If you look back at that document, that 102.3 million that we're talking about, the 82 in the future column, plus the 18 and 2 that are transportation and parks and recreation referendum, this document contemplates that the town hall would be an installment financing, not necessarily a general obligation bond. We can get into whether it should be a GO bond or installment financing.
What happened to the laser we used to have?
Yeah, 6 one, half dozen another.
Well, if you take 17 million bucks out of a geo bond, it looks a little bit better, I think, than a public.
Well, that 102, 103 excludes town hall, so if you wanted to.
Yeah, that doesn't, town,
It excludes
town
town
hall's
hall.
right here. What Jackie's looking at is this 82 plus these two numbers here, and here's town hall. So that 103 is not including the 17 for town hall.
So you're planning on going to the debt market with that?
Yes. A town hall is an easy installment financing. I'm going to refer to that as comparable to a mortgage. A road for a bank is not awesome collateral. And so what we would need, I would strongly ask you to consider for greenways and in road debt to consider a general obligation bond.
What about
Take it out.
fire station?
A fire station is more comparable to a town hall than a road. So you absolutely can get GO, general obligation bonds for town halls and fire stations. But you don't necessarily have to.
To answer your question, I'm going to say no sooner than 23.
We'll have to, or else shut it down. We will have to do a bond.
Because there
It's
are
not gonna-
projects that we contemplate today funding in 24 and 25 that would be relying on that issue. November of 23 is 5 months into FY 24. So it works, but I wouldn't count on putting it off any longer than that. Otherwise, you're slowing down projects more.
Well, I think the other piece is getting to the voter and asking for permission for this sooner rather than later, because we all know the county and CMS are going to be at the table next year. And do you want to be on the ballot with the county and CMS?
You're going to be on the ballot with them regardless of what year technically, because they all have their elections this year.
True, but I mean for their bonds.
Yeah, but still, I don't want political parties perverting this issue. And the only way to avoid that is to stay in our own election where the local voters who actually pay attention and care have their voices heard. And that's my concern, because I don't want either party doing something negative that impacts our town. So I like town issues on town ballots. Shame on CMS and shame on the county for waiting to do their stuff during our elections because it's sneaky and underhanded.
I tend to agree with the second half of your sentiment, at the very least. Yes, CMS and county should be ashamed of the fact that they're putting it off on the lowest turnout election possible. And we should set a better example by putting that on a higher turnout election so we get more of the overall input of the voters, actual voters. And just like last time, I mean, I pointed this out when Jackie had mentioned the $66 million loan. It will cost us $10 million to put this off the year. $10 million. And if we actually
Well, we take
ask
town hall
for-
out of here, there's 16 million back.
That's not in there.
I know, I'm
It's not
giving you a
in
hard
there.
time.
I'm just saying, it's not in there. And if we actually ask for the amount we should ask for, which is probably somewhere between $100 and $110 million, which is to get the stuff done that needs to get done, yes, it's a painful point when you add that one in front. But if we actually did that and we'd be talking $15 to $20 million for putting it off for a year for political posturing.
I don't think it's not political posturing to me. I just don't want the
But
parties to take something that matters and ruin it because you support this bond. What if it doesn't go through because we put it on this election, because both sides decide, oh, we're going to take a local issue and make it. That's what I'm concerned about. If it's something that really needs to be done, it shouldn't even be political, you know?
It's going to happen regardless. If somebody wants to make a bond package political, regardless of whether it's in 2022 or 2023, they're going to do it.
Right, and if the cost, let's just say the cost is $13 million, that putting it off 1 year, 65,000 residents, that's $2,000 per person, light it on fire.
gone. And not per voter, not
Yeah.
per adult, every single person. A family of $5,000, $10,000, light on fire, it's gone. Because we want to wait a year. I am not going to do that. We have to be fiscally responsible, and we have to acknowledge the fact that that's money, and we have these things that need to get done.
Commissioner Parker.
Thank you. Well, I had made this comment before at the last meeting, and I tend to agree with Commissioner Munger that the longer we put this off, the more the cost is going to increase. I think it's unfair to our voters and our residents of Huntersville, where we were elected to make a decision and not to be political about this. And I understand what Commissioner Phillips is saying, but we have to make the tough decisions. And that's what we're elected to do. And I like to get this thing done sooner than later, because down the line, it's, like I said, it increased. The cost is always increasing and will increase. So we have to take the hit. If we got to take the hit, I'll take the hit. If that's how the voters are going to vote or how the voters are going to see it. But I'm not afraid to take the hit, because I got elected to make a decision and stick with it, and let's move on. Let's get this thing done.
But my thing is, okay, so you guys do it this election, and then it gets shot down this election, so then you put it on the next one.
If it gets shot down this election, then I would look at it as the residents.
Okay.
They voted.
They don't want the projects to be done.
Yeah, we start peeling back CIPs and saying,
And
well,
you
this is not
start
going to
reading,
get
and
done.
this board would have to turn around and reevaluate.
Right.
At that point, what's critical and what's important to the town and to the citizens of our community. But each and every one of us has been elected, and we talked about moving our projects forward. Every single one of us talked about that, making sure things happen. I do have great concerns about postponing it a year and wasting taxpayer dollars. And to talk about $10 million, that just is a bit unnerving.
It's a sixth of
I'm
what
not
we're
one to
asking for
flush the
almost.
toilet on 10 million.
It's almost a sixth of what we're asking for.
Yeah.
So where are we at? What direction do we want to give?
Take
22,
straw poll,
23?
22, 22.
22.
23.
23.
I heard 3 for 22.
That's what I heard.
Point of order. We have a commissioner who's not here.
We'll brush over it lightly at the next pre-meeting.
Thank you.
As long as you
It
stick
ain't
with the
gonna
same
go lightly.
thing. So pre-meeting, we'll talk about that and whatever the CIP and try to knock that out. 5 o'clock pre-meeting, okay?
Yep.
I need a motion.
Oh, I make a motion. We adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Good night, everyone.